Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend, the D and WhatIf, with another fanfiction. This is the first part of WhatIf Deku Midoriya built his own heroes. All credits for this video go to their respective authors, so please support the real author. Check out the link in the description for more details. Please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. Speech, thoughts, tape 1. My name is Deku Midoriya ... and I am trying to create life. A fully sentient android who will go on to save lives. A hero. I know it sounds crazy ... but I can't take it anymore. All I have is my mom and she is so busy it's getting to the point where I rarely see her anymore. And due to my quirklessness, making friends is all but impossible. So I want to have company, then my only choice is to make some. Lucky I have, well, let's just say an above average intelligence and a keen interest in machines. I am making these tapes so in the event that an incident occurs that causes me to lose my memory, I'll be able to listen to these and figure out what I was doing. I have already started drawing up blueprints and I plan on getting my materials from that beach where everyone throws their trash. I'm hoping to get her ready by the UA entrance exam, which will be happening in about 9 months. Hopefully, this will go well. Tape 2. This is not going well. To put it simply, I underestimated the type of parts I needed to do this. The beach has basically nothing strong or complex enough to use and I don't have the money for the parts I need. If I can't find a way to get parts, then this project is done. Tape 3. It seems that for the first time in my life I got lucky. When I was searching for parts on the beach again, a black portal appeared and swallowed me. Next thing I knew, I was in a dark room with a very strange man. He has no face except for a mouth and outlines of where his eyes should be. He wore a black suit and was attached to what looked like life support. He introduced himself as All for One and he told me he could help me with my project. I asked how he knew about my project. I hadn't told anyone, not even my mom, about what I was doing. He just laughed and said it didn't matter. He told me that he could give me all the resources I needed to complete my work. But he said he wanted one thing. He wanted me to make him an android as well. That is to say, he wanted me to make a second android for him. Not that he wanted me to turn him into an android. Jay just wanted to clarify that. This all seemed so shady. In truth, I probably should have said no. But I can't be alone again. Tape 4. All for One wasn't lying when he said he could give me everything I needed. Parts, better blueprint paper, computers. He even gave me a fully functioning lab. I can't tell you how much better it is to work in a lab instead of just my bedroom. Tape 8. Finally, the blueprints are done and I can get to work on the bodies for the two. All for One had given me instructions on what he wanted his android to look like. He said he wanted it to be a child. White-haired, male. He seemed to know exactly what he wanted, which made me a little suspicious. But at this point, there was no turning back. I decided I would make my android female since I was already making a male one, so I figured I would go for some variety. I know that a female android would technically be called a gynoid, but that sounds weird and I don't think it truly matters all that much. It's getting awkward to just call them the android that belongs to me and the android that belongs to him. Also, it kind of makes it sound like we own them, which doesn't sound right with me. I have decided to call her Tsukui. It means salvation. I named her that because I hope she can be not just my salvation, but salvation to many different people as well. Tape 30. The bodies are nearing completion. I gave Tsukui green wire-like hair with plugs at the end. These plugs will serve as a way to interface with any form of technology. It still looks like hair, but it's really shiny. It's actually really pretty to look at. Its bright green matches her eyes. She is somewhat muscular for a female, but not too much so. Just enough to support her weapons system. I've been trying to make her conventionally attractive. After all, many girls talk about how they wish they were prettier. And I don't want that for her. I want her to be happy with how she looks. The breasts were the most awkward part. I hesitated on giving her these, but one of the things I've heard girls complain about and bully other girls over is the size of their breasts, so my hands were tied. I hope I made them a decent size without making them too big ... God, this is embarrassing. She will be powered by a fusion reactor, and on top of that, I've also made it so that she can absorb solar energy and use it as power in case something happens to her reactor or if she needs to attack. Oh, right, I should probably talk about her weapons system. First and foremost, her strength is insane. At max strength, she could most likely pick up a bus. Her durability is about on the same level as her strength, so all in all, unless she gets in a fight with someone with a powerful strength enhancement quirk, she'll be fine. She is also very durable when it comes to elemental damage. Electricity won't be able to do any significant damage. She's totally waterproof and extremely fire resistant, although someone like Endeavor would still be able to destroy her. Her speed will be a few levels above the average person, although anyone with a quirk that can significantly boost their speed will likely still be faster. Lastly, for long-range attacks, I've given her the ability to blast condensed solar energy from her eyes. In other words, I gave her laser eyes. Her eyes will also be able to scan and analyze people. although I can't do much more with her sensors until I can make her sentient. All for One told me not to give his android any weapons. I won't lie, this did make me feel better about working with him, knowing that he could not use the android to hurt people. All I need to do is add the artificial skin. Then I can move on to the hard part, giving them life. Tape 33. So this is going to be easier than I thought. You see, what I need to do is take brainwaves and convert certain aspects of those brainwaves and turn them into new brainwaves. It's a lot more complicated than it sounds. At first, I was concerned that my inexperience would make things difficult. However, when I voiced this concern to All for One, he said he would partner me with someone who had experience with the brain. He calls himself the Doctor and he is a genius. He seemed very interested in my project and me. He asked me what I planned to do after my project was done. To be honest, I didn't really know. I guess I'll just join UA as support course and help Sukui with being a hero. Then he said something that concerned me. He said, "Why stop? You are creating a whole new form of life far beyond humans, much like mine." I asked him what he meant about that much like mine part. He didn't give me an answer. Tape 35. So I decided to use my own brain waves to make the baseline for Sukui. However, I also wanted to combine them with Kaken's. I've always admired Kaken's strength, his confidence, his willpower, his sheer desire to win. I would love for Sukui to have these traits. However, getting Kaken's brain waves would not be an easy task. I talked about this with All for One and he said he would take care of this. I told him he really didn't need to, mostly because I was concerned about Kaken. However, All for One seemed to read my mind and told me that he would be fine. I did not have the will to argue. The next day, All for One gave me a drive with Kaken's brain waves. I called Aunt Mitsuki and she said Kaken was fine. All for One is a very scary man. At the same time, All for One gave me the brain waves he wanted me to use for his android. The doctor instructed me to use these brain waves exactly and not to make any original ones. I told him that would make the android an exact copy of a person rather than a new person. They would even have the memories of that person. He said that was the point. For whatever reason, All for One wanted me to make a copy of someone. After analyzing the brain waves, I could tell that they were cut off at a certain point. Given the fact that the body for the android was that of a child, it seems like All for One wanted me to make a copy of someone as a child. Given that the android would have no weapons, I figured it would be fine to not look into this any further. After all, this might be a personal matter and I don't want to intrude. Tape 49. They're alive. They may not be up and moving around, but their programs are now sentient on a subconscious level. It's kind of like a baby in the womb after their brain has fully formed. Sukui's program is taking the thoughts and feelings from mine and Bakugo's brain waves and using them a foundation to form a new person entirely, with new feelings and new thoughts. All for One's android, who he still won't tell me the name of, is much simpler. His program is just taking those memories and emotions and making it so they can continue on as if he was the original person. Also, as much as I didn't want to do it, I added something into her programming, a safety precaution, to make sure that she would never be able to hurt an innocent person. It's about 2 months before the UA entrance exam. I should be able to get her up and running long before then. Tape 52. Tomorrow is the day these two will be fully operational. We have already installed the program into their bodies. Now we just have to wait for their subconsciousness to adjust to their bodies and become fully conscious. All for One took the body of his now fully complete android. He congratulated me on my success and thanked me for making him the android. A black portal opened and he told me I could keep the lab before leaving. After that, I was left with Sukui. Her fully completed form looked entirely human. The only thing that looked somewhat robotic was the plugs on the end of her hair, although people would probably just assume that it was her quirk. This will be my last tape. With the project complete and my memories still intact, I don't really have a need for these. Still, I think I'll keep these around. Might be nice to listen through them again one day. End of tapes. Third person. Izuku had stayed at the lab that night. His mother had been working late, so he was sure she went right to sleep that night. He woke up to find he had fallen asleep on the work table in his rolling chair. "Are you awake, father?" asked a sweet and somewhat robotic voice. Izuku froze. He looked up and found Sukui, upright, awake and looking right at him. Izuku backed up, startled by his creation, which caused him to accidentally fall out of his chair and onto the floor. "Oh," Izuku said. Sukui rushed to his side. "Father, are you okay? My sensors tell me that no damage has occurred, but are you in any pain?" Izuku didn't respond. He was too busy looking in amazement at his creation. "Father, is something wrong?" Sukui asked. "You're alive," Izuku said, his tone filled with disbelief. Sukui looked at him confused. "Yes, you made me perfectly. The fact that I am operational should not be a surprise. You're alive. You're alive," Izuku shouted as he leaped up with glee. Izuku started barraging her with questions. "How do you feel? Are your touch sensors working right? Do you still have any of Kaken's or my memories?" "Father, please slow down," Sukui said. If I attempted to answer those all at once, it would be confusing. Izuku realized that he had gotten carried away and apologized. Sorry, it's just, I had doubts. The whole idea of creating life just seems insane even after all the work was already done. I guess I still didn't believe I could do it. Sukui was still confused. Father, why did you doubt yourself so much? Izuku didn't know how to answer that question. The numbers told him he would be able to do it, and after all, for one provided him with the resources. It should have been pretty clear that he would succeed. Still, to Izuku it was strange to think he could accomplish anything. After years of being called useless, to achieve something like this was. Tears went down Izuku's face. He had really done it. Father, Sukui said, alarmed by the tears. Is something wrong? Have I done something to upset you? Izuku tried to wipe the joyful tears from his eyes to no avail. No, it's just I did it. Sukui had no idea what was going on. Tears were typically a sign of sadness, so why did her father seem happy? With her sensors not being able to figure out the best solution, she decided that she would just go with what felt right. And so the creation hugged her creator. Izuku's eyes widened as her arms closed around him. It had been so long since he had received a hug. Deku Midoriya cried in his creation's arms as he was reminded of why he built her in the first place. Finally, he would never be lonely again. Meanwhile, a small boy woke up in a room. This room wasn't familiar to the boy, and he had no idea on how he got here. He looked down to see he was in a bed. Also, something that was unfamiliar to him. I see you're awake. The boy looked to his side and screamed. AHHH. To his left was the scariest looking man he had ever seen. Come now. I know I look and sound different from what you remember, but it's still my little brother. All for one stared at the child form of his long-dead little brother. This time, this will go very differently. Speech. Thoughts. Deku Midoriya walked into her house after a long day of work, ready to go to bed. She sighed, looking at her door sadly. I'm so tired, I don't think I'll be able to make dinner. I hope Izuku found something to eat. After Izuku's father died, Deku had to work 2 jobs in order to allow her and Izuku to live comfortably. Of course, this resulted in Deku having a lot less time to spend with her son, which tore her apart on the inside. Deku walked up to her door and opened it, walking past the doorway. She walked past the kitchen and she walked past her son sitting next to a girl she didn't know. Wait a minute. Deku backed up to see that the girl was in fact not an illusion. Hello, grandmother, she said, giving her a bright smile. Thud. Mom, grandmother. The next day, Deku opened her eyes and saw daylight. What a strange dream, she thought. Deku remembered it was Sunday. Her one day off, so she didn't have to be in a hurry. I should make Izuku some breakfast. Deku got out of bed, which she strangely didn't remember climbing onto, and opened the door. Hello, grandmother, are you feeling better? Deku's eyes widened as in front of her was the exact same girl from what she thought was her dream. Deku and Sukui started at each other, speechless, until Izuku walked up to them. Oh, good morning, Mom, he said, looking nervously between the two. Deku looked at Izuku with a baffled expression. Izuku, who is this girl? And why is she calling me grandmother? Her name is Sukui, and the reason she's calling you grandmother is because you are. Izuku said nervously, trying to figure out the best way to explain this. The realization that Izuku would have to introduce his mother to Sukui hit him like a brick wall back at the lab. It didn't help that Sukui insisted on calling him father, which was technically true, and calling his mother grandmother. What do you mean she is? Asked Deku, who was now freaking out. Mom, please calm down, Izuku said, also starting to panic. She's an android. I created her, so that technically makes me her father, and that technically makes you her grandmother. The panic on Deku's face was replaced by confusion. Izuku, what does any of them mean? Izuku sighed. This might take a while. One explanation later. So you made a person ... I in a lab, Deku said, trying to come to grips with what Izuku had told her. Well, to put it simply, yes, Izuku verified. It was funny. Only a few days ago, Deku had been worrying about never having grandchildren. Now here she was with an already teenage granddaughter right in front of her. Izuku, why didn't you tell me about this? Deku asked, her panic returning. I'm too young to a grandmother. Well, you were so busy I didn't want to bother you. Izuku lied. In truth, he knew his mother would try and stop him, especially if she found out he had been working with such shady people. Sukui frowned as her built-in lie detector went off, telling her about her father's deception. She wondered why her father would lie about this. The aging, she didn't know anything about her creation herself. She decided she would ask him about it later, as she trusted her father enough not to expose his lie. Still, Izuku, why did you make her in the first place? Deku asked. Well, because I thought it would be fun. Izuku lied once more. He hated lying to his mother, but if she knew the real reason, she would likely blame herself for his loneliness. You thought making me an early grandmother would be fun? Deku asked, now brandishing the trademark Midoriya tears. Grandmother, do you dislike me? Sukui asked sadly. Deku looked at Suki's sad expression and felt her motherly, or in this case grandmotherly, instincts kick in. No, of course not, dear, it's just strange to think I have granddaughter. Buter here, so as your grandmother I try to show you all the care you deserve, Inko said. Sukui's expression immediately brightened, and without hesitation, she hugged Inko tightly. Inko smiled and hugged back. Looks like I have a granddaughter now. She still wasn't used to the idea, and she was probably going to need to talk to Izuku later when Sukui wasn't around, but for now, she would just enjoy having a new member of the family. Izuku took a sigh of relief. This went better than he had expected. Father, would you like to join us? Sukui asked, opening her arm to allow Izuku to join the hug. Inko did the same and motioned for Izuku to join them. Izuku did so, and the Midoriya family engaged in a group hug. Izuku smiled as a tear went down his cheek. It was all worth it, just for this. Later that night, Inko had gone to bed. She had to wake up for work the next morning, so she needed the rest. However, Izuku and Sukui realized that there was a problem. There was only one bed. You see, while Sukui did not actually need to sleep, it did help her process data by shutting down unneeded functions until she woke up. She was programmed to always sleep for 8 hours unless something triggered her wake-up protocols, like a loud noise, sudden force, or someone calling her name. Izuku was offered the bed in his room to Sukui as he wanted her to be comfortable. Sukui could feel things like comfort due to her sensors, which sent information like smell, taste, and feeling to her head and thus allowed her to feel it in the same way normal humans do. However, it was dulled a bit due to the artificial skin, so she could only experience about half as much feeling as a normal human. Izuku also did not program the sensors to detect pain, so she could not feel pain. However, she had a different idea and picked up Izuku, threw him into the bed, got in and held Izuku down with a hug, making sure he could not escape. Izuku struggled, trying desperately to escape, but to no avail. Eventually, Izuku stopped and went to bed. Meanwhile, elsewhere, in the ruins of the Yakuza's base laid Kai Chisaki. Overhaul. His base in ruins, his followers slaughtered, and his quirk gone. He knew he was done. He should have never allowed that man into his base. He was the stuff of myths, a real-life boogeyman, and he had just allowed him into his home. I must thank you, Overhaul. Overhaul looked up at the man that had ruined him. All for one. The large faceless man stood before him carrying what was his. Thanks to you, I now have a way to accomplish my goals without compromise. All for one said, holding up the unconscious girl. Earlier that day, All for One came to the Yakuza saying that he had a proposition that could benefit both of them. It only took one look at All for One's broken, faceless body to figure out what he wanted. The two had gotten into negotiations when suddenly Eri came running into the room in one of her normally fruitless escape attempts. All for One turned his head towards her, and after a few seconds he smiled. And now Overhaul was here, dying. However, I'm afraid that I no longer have use for you. And when I kill her tormentors, I'm sure the girl will be as trusting of me as I need her to be. He said. What are you planning? Overhaul asked. He might as well learn the reason he was going to die. All for One laughed. My retirement plan, of course. You see, I used to have it all planned out. However, a recent development has caused me to change those plans, and you were going to be an essential part of them. But now that I have this girl, that is no longer the case. It's strange how things have just been going my way recently. They'll never let you off, and if you run to the ends of the earth, the heroes will find you. Overhaul said. All for One just laughed once more. I never knew you were such an avid believer in heroes, Overhaul. Or perhaps it's just your wishful thinking. Either way, I think we are done here. All for One aimed his palm at Overhaul. Goodbye. Boom. The next day, Eri opened her eyes. What happened? She thought. She had tried to escape and ran into a room with Overhaul and a strange man. The man smiled at her, and then she woke up here. You're awake. Eri jumped and turned her head to the source of the voice. It was a boy who looked to be around her age, with messy white hair and red eyes. He was sitting on a chair next to her, giving her an excited look. Eri crawled backward on her bed, but when she tried to move, she felt a pain in her back. The boy grabbed the girl and gave her a concerned look. Don't move too much. Your big brother said that'll you'll reopen your wounds. The boy said. Eri looked at the boy confused and scared. Where am I? Who are you? The boy frowned. Don't be scared. My name is Yoi Otoko. But just call me Yoi. You're at my house. My brother saved you from some bad people and took care of your injuries. Saved me from bad people. Does that mean Overhaul is gone? Hope swelled in Eri's chest. She should know better than to hope. After all, hope had only ever led to disappointment for Eri. But if this boy was here, maybe it was true. A feeling of hope started to overwhelm Eri, and she started to cry. Her horn grew and a green glow covered her. Yoi immediately went to comfort the crying girl by hugging her. Eri was shocked at this. The way he held her it wasn't like anyone else had. It was gentle and kind. Eri let herself lean into the hug, completely forgetting about her quirk, which didn't seem to be affecting the boy. For the first time since Eri could remember, she was allowed to cry. After a few minutes, Eri's tears turned to sniffles. Her horn had receded into her head and the glow was gone. Well, that was touching. Eri and Yoi looked toward the sound of the voice and found All for One staring back at them. Except he looked very different. No longer was he a faceless, with a body ruined by battle. No, now he was a large, well-dressed man, with white hair and red eyes. All for one had been restored to perfect health. Harry looked at the man and recognized his suit. It was the man who was with Overhaul. Aku, Yoi said, "You're back." Yoi ran up to his brother, who bent down to allow his younger sibling to hug him. The two embraced. All for one looked at Eri, who was giving him a fearful look. "Hello, Eri, my name is Aku Atoko, but please call me All for One." All for One said, separating from his brother and walking over to the scared child. "I saved you from those awful Yakuza, however in the fight they injured your back." This was a lie. In truth, All for One used his forced quirk activation quirk on her in order to restore himself, injuring her back the process. "But you don't need to worry about them anymore," All for One reassured. "The heroes arrested them and they will never be able to hurt you again." "And never?" Eri asked, her voice trembling with all sorts of emotions. Happiness, disbelief, and hope the most prominent among them. All for One chuckled and patted Eri on the head. "Never." But this more, a few more tears fell from Eri's eyes as she leaned over and hugged All for One. "See, thank you." Finally, her nightmare had ended. Later at the doctor's lab, All for One emerged from a warp gate into the laboratory to see the doctor looking at the news. "I thought you were going to work with Overhaul." The doctor said the unasked question is why he killed the Yakuza. "I was, however, I found a better option." All for One said. "Oh, and what would that be?" The doctor asked. "The Yakuza were keeping a child captive, a young girl named Eri." All for One explained. "Her quirk allows her to turn back a person's biological clock. It is quite powerful." The doctor laughed. "I can see that. You look better than you have in years." All for One joined in on the laughter. "I suppose so. So what are you going to do with the girl?" The doctor asked. "If you don't have any plans for her, then I wouldn't mind taking her. The things I could do with a quirk like hers." All for One shook his head. "My apologies. I plan to keep her around. After all, she and Yoi have gotten quite attached, and it's a good idea to guarantee that he always has at least one friend. After all, his appearance leaves him a target for social ostracization, and I would rather he not be miserable for the rest of eternity." "Ah yes, children can be quite cruel, can't they?" The doctor said. "Yes, although I suppose I should be thankful for that." All for One pondered. After all, if it weren't for that feeling of loneliness children get when they are alone, then Midoriya may have never started on his project, and I may have never my brother back. "True," the doctor said. "Speaking of Midoriya, what do you plan to do with him? He is far too dangerous too." "I don't plan on doing anything to him," All for One said, interrupting the doctor. "I need him in case something happens to Yoi." "Didn't you take Overhaul's quirk? Could you not simply repair him with that?" The doctor asked, knowing that if Overhaul was dead, then there was no way All for One did not take his quirk. All for One shook his head again. "Yes, however, I have no knowledge of how his body works. If, say, his arm is destroyed, then I will only be able to reattach it to his body rather than making it fully functional." "I see," the doctor responded. "So you need the boy alive." "I will keep that in mind. However, what happens if Tamura goes after him?" All for One grinned. "I have a plan for that. Now shall we get to the reason I'm here?" Yes, that. Are you truly sure you want to retire? Now that you have been restored, you could kill All Might before he..." All for One cut him off once more. "No, I have tried to kill off the One for All users before they passed on the quirk, many times. However, somehow, someway they always persist. As a villain, I've had a good run. Many villains don't even get to retire, and until recently I had planned on being one of those villains. But now that's changed. I have my brother, and I'll just go for my retirement now before something happens to mess it up." The doctor sighed. "Well, are you sure about giving up that many quirks?" All for One nodded. "Once I give All for One to Tamura, my body won't be able to support having all these quirks inside me. However, I will be able to keep the ones I require, so it doesn't matter all that much." "Well, if you're sure," the doctor said sadly. "I'm going to miss you, old friend." All for One gave his signature smirk. "And you." The next day, Tamura looked in horror as his sensei lay dying. In all his years with him, he had never seen him on a bed, but it seemed like the wounds he had gotten from the fight with All Might all those years ago were now too much for him. "Sensei, please, you can't die. Don't leave me," Tamura cried. "Tamura," All for One said in a weak voice. "I'm sorry, but I can't hold on for much longer." All for One coughed and blood came out. "Tamura, I have one last gift for you," All for One said. Before Tamura could ask what it was, he felt All for One's palm around his face. Suddenly, a weird sensation filled Tamura as he felt something enter his body. And just like that, it was done. "Sensei, what?" "Tamura," All for One said, cutting his protege off. "I have given you my quirk. With it, I know you can achieve your goals." "Sensei," Tamura said in disbelief. All for One coughed up some more blood. "It's almost time," All for One said. "Before I die, I need you to promise me something." Tamura gave his teacher a determined look, one that All for One had rarely seen on him. "Anything. There is a boy ... with green hair ... His name is Izuku Midoriya. He did me a great favor in the past, one I can never repay him for. You must promise me to never bring him harm." All for One explained. I promise, Tamura said. He had never heard of this boy before, but if his sensei wanted him unharmed, then Tamura wouldn't lay a finger on him. All for One smiled. Good, thank you, Tamura. I know you will make me proud. And with those last words, All for One went limp. In the heart monitor he had been attached to flatline. Tamura held the hand of his master with his pinkies not attached so he didn't disintegrate him. I promise you, sensei. I will make All Might pay. A few hours later, after Tamura had left, the only ones in the room were Kurogiri and the seemingly dead body of All for One. Seemingly being the K-word. After a few minutes, Kurogiri spoke. I believe he is gone. All for One rose from the table with a yawn. Finally, I was worried he was going to take my hands with him. It would not be hard to picture, Kurogiri said. All for One detached himself from the fake life support machines and took off the face mask he had been using to make it look like he was still injured. Have Yoi and Eri been moved to the location? All for One asked. Of course, Kurogiri said. Did you send the letter? All for One asked, reaching into his pocket. All Might should be reading it by morning. Kurogiri answered, divided by. Good, replied All for One. Then this is where we part ways, my friend. Kurogiri bowed. It had been an honor. All for One took out a needle from his pocket and injected Kurogiri with it. Kurogiri reacted violently, his body spasming for a few seconds before he got his bearings. Trigger. The place All for One needed to go was far past the range Kurogiri was capable of, so the drug was required. And with that, Kurogiri opened a warp gate. Far, far away from here. All for One stepped through the warp gate and found himself in a farmhouse. The warp gate closed behind him, and with that, All for One was officially retired. Izuku sighed. He had just finished hacking Sukui into the system. The Midoriyas were not exactly a notable family. As far as the government was concerned, they were just an average family. So it was safe to say no one would notice if they suddenly gained a new family member. Of course, she was registered as his sister because someone might notice if it was listed that a 15-year-old was listed as the daughter of another 15 years old, which was another problem. Sukui would not stop calling him father. According to her, calling him anything else felt uncomfortable, which would be a problem if they tried to register the normal way. Hence the hacking. Izuku looked at the clock. It was almost time for school. Sukui had been registered as being homeschooled, which if anyone actually looked into the Midoriyas, they would be able to figure out something was up, considering Inko's work schedule is packed and Izuku's father was dead, so no one would be able to homeschool Sukui. But once again, no one cared. For once, Izuku was glad he was unnoticeable. Izuku got his book bag and met Sukui at the door. Father, you are heading to school, yes? Sukui asked. Yes. Is there something you wanted? Izuku asked, finding it strange she was just standing by the door. I would like to walk with you, Sukui said. I am aware I cannot enter the school building due to me not being enrolled. However, I would like to accompany you to the building. Izuku smiled. This is exactly what he wanted. He had always looked at pairs and groups of friends walking to and from school, and his feeling of loneliness grew. Of course, Izuku said. Sukui smiled back. Then it would be best to leave at this time. Sukui pulled 2 brown bags. I may not have been programmed with the knowledge of cooking, however, I believe I have discovered the basics of the sandwich. Izuku honestly found it adorable how excited she was about making a sandwich. Wait, Izuku noticed something. There are 2 bags. Sukui nodded. Yes, one for your breakfast and one for lunch. Izuku's heart melted. Even if it was just a sandwich, someone made food for him. Father, we had better leave at this time, Sukui said, using her built-in clock to tell the time. I intend to take the longer route, so if we do not leave within the next few minutes, then you will be late. Oh, sorry, let's hhhh. Izuku was interpreted by Sukui shoving a sandwich into his mouth. No time, she said before taking Izuku's hand, dragging him out the door. Later, like Sukui said, she and he had taken the long way to school. And for good reason. The longer route involved them going through a park, which was something Sukui had wanted to do since her creation. If they were not in such a hurry, it would have been nice to stop and look at all the flowers, trees and birds going by. It was a very pleasant sight. I wonder why I stopped going this route, Izuku thought to himself. I mean, I know it's longer, but DIKU. Oh yeah, that's why. Izuku and Sukui turned around to see none other than Bakugo Katsuki. What the hell did I tell you about coming this way, Deku? Bakugo snarled, his 2 goons snickering at his side. Deku struggled for an explanation. What exactly is the issue with us going this way? Sukui asked, cutting Izuku off. Sukui knew who Bakugo was. However, her memories of him were incomplete. All the memories of him she had been exposed to stopped after they reached the age of 4. The issue, Bakugo snarled. The issue is that I don't want to see Deku's fucking face any longer than I have to. Sukui was taken aback. She knew that people changed over the years, but this was just so different from what she had seen of him in her father's memories. Why? Sukui asked, trying to figure out how different he was from the memories she had of him. What the fuck is with all these stupid questions? Bakugo said. Why the hell would anyone want to look at Deku? I already have to put up with having him in the same fucking class. Like hell I'm gonna let him walk the same way I do. Yeah, one of the goons said in the background. Bakugo got closer to Tsukui. Who the hell even are you? Deku's fucking girlfriend. Tsukui glared at him. My name is Deku Midoriya. I am his daughter. Everyone was silent. Izuku's face was in his hand as he tried in vain to hide his embarrassment. The two goons were looking rapidly between the two and Bakugo was frozen, his expression stuck in a WTF look. I could explain, Tsukui thought, but it appears that Bakugo Katsuki has turned into what is widely referred to as an asshole. There is a 90% chance that not explaining the situation will make Bakugo Katsuki angry. Path selected. With that, Tsukui picked up her father. Tsukui, what are you doing? Izuku asked, really confused and startled by suddenly being hoisted up. Tsukui gave no answer as she ran off, leaving Bakugo and his goons in the dust. What the fuck just happened? Said one of the goons. Could Deku really have a daughter? Said the other goon. No way, she looks like she's his age. Said the first goon. Yeah, but quirks can do some weird shit, man. Said goon 2. Who knows, maybe Deku had sex with someone with some kind of time quirk. I mean, he has been pretty hard to find recently, maybe. Shut up, Bakugo screamed. The two goons back away in fear. You stupid assholes. Do you really think anyone would be desperate enough to fuck Deku? Bakugo said. Though, yeah, that doesn't add up. The first goon said. But then why the hell did she say she was his daughter? The other goon said. Bakugo glared at the two. I don't know, but I'm gonna find out. Later, while Izuku's in school, Tsukui walked through the park with a starstruck look on her face. Her father had shown her images and videos of things like birds and trees while her subconsciousness, and had even programmed what they would smell and feel like, but to see them in person ... it was just better. Perhaps it was because her consciousness was now fully formed, or perhaps it was something else, but for whatever reason Tsukui loved looking trees shake in the wind, the birds giving food to their young and the squirrels scurrying around looking for food. She loved the life around her. Suddenly Tsukui's sensors picked up the sounds of a little girl in distress. Tsukui headed towards the source of the sound to find a little girl trying to climb a tree, presumably to get the cat that seemed to be stuck. The girl had tears in her eyes as she slid down the tree once more. I see, Tsukui thought. Situation analyzed. Solution found. With that, Tsukui ran at the tree and jumped, grabbing the cat. She then performed a somersault as she landed on her feet, the cat safely in her arms. She turned back to the girl who was looking at her in amazement. She walked up to the girl and held the cat out toward her. Tsukui leaned down and handed the girl her cat back. Here you go. Wow, the girl said with stars in her eyes. Thank you. The girl heard her parents calling her and ran off, waving goodbye to Tsukui, who waved back with a smile. What is this feeling? Tsukui wondered. Analysis points to the feeling being pride, saving that cat and seeing that girl so happy. It made her feel amazing. What was almost as good was the look the girl had in her eyes. That starry-eyed look made Tsukui feel like she was the coolest person in the world. I mean, if I think about it, I am pretty amazing. Tsukui thought to herself. I am the first fully sentient android made to save lives and kick butt after all. Tsukui put her hands on her hips and smirked. Father truly is the greatest mind on earth, and lady. Tsukui looked to the side to see a young boy looking at her strangely. Are you okay? You're just standing weirdly and yelling things at no one. Yelling? I could have sworn I had kept that monologue exclusive to the confines of my head. Could this be a glitch? She wondered. I will have to ask father about this. I am fine, little boy, Tsukui said. It was simply a possible programming error. The boy tilted his head in confusion. You're a weird lady. Later, after school, Izuku packed up as quickly as he could. Normally, Izuku ended up leaving a little later than everyone else. However, today he was eager to get as far away from Bakugo as he could. He knew that he would be extremely pissed off after what happened in the park, and this idea was enforced by the fact that when Bakugo entered the classroom, he gave Izuku a look that almost made him faint on the spot. However, strangely enough, Bakugo was nowhere to be seen at the end of class. Izuku pondered this as he walked to the exit. I wonder where Cat and we. Boom. Izuku flinched. He knew that sound all too well. The sound of an explosion. And he knew better than to hope it was some kind of accident. Despite the fact that it was illegal to use your quirk in public, people tended to do it anyway. No one really got in trouble when they used their quirk in minor or ignorable fashion. It was kind of like jaywalking or speeding. So long as you didn't commit some form of villainy of vigilantism, people would just walk past a person casually using their quirk. Of course, this was not the case for people with powerful quirks. They only ever get reported if a hero is around usually. A guy with a strong quirk could beat a guy up in front of a crowd, and so long as none of them were heroes, then no one would do anything. This was because of three things. 1, they didn't want to be a target. 2, they expect the heroes to do something about it. And 3, they just don't care. This happened in schools too. Teachers and principals wanting to make their schools look better by having some students with strong quirks go on to hero schools. So they ignore a lot of things kids with strong quirks do, like bullying and fighting. Izuku had suffered because of this, and it seems like whoever was unfortunate enough to be noticed by Bakugo was suffering it too. Izuku sighed. He couldn't allow this. Time to get beat up again. Izuku thought to himself as he ran to the main entrance. When Izuku got there, his jaw dropped at what he saw. Tsukui was facing off against Bakugo, who had some scrapes and bruises on him and was kneeling down. "I'm afraid you stand no chance, Katsuki Bakugo," Tsukui said in a surprisingly overdramatic fashion. "Father has given me all of your combat data, including all of your attack and pursuit techniques. Will you stop calling that quirkless bastard your father?" Bakugo screamed. "Who the fuck are you?" Tsukui smirked and put her hand on her hips. "I am the ultimate advancement in human civilization. I am the peak technological achievement. I am the ultimate hero come to save the day from evildoers." She pointed a finger at Bakugo in dramatic fashion. "I am Deku Midoriya, future #1 hero." No one said a word as they were all too shocked to even move, partially from the fact that someone actually stood up to Bakugo and partially due to her over-the-top introduction. Where the heck did that come from? Izuku was the most shocked out of anyone here. Bakugo was the first to speak. "All right, that's it." Bakugo burst forward and prepared for his usual method of attack. Just as Tsukui went to counter, Bakugo let off an explosion to change his trajectory. Target has changed course. Analyzing trajectory and comparing it to known methods of attack employed by subject Katsuki Bakugo. Conclusion: the target will attempt to attack from behind, initiating preemptive attack. Just as Bakugo had positioned himself behind her, Tsukui punched him in the face, launching him across the entrance. Bakugo slowly got up and readied himself to attack again. "Kaken, stop!" Izuku yelled, running in between the two. Tsukui smiled. "Father, you're here. Good. I have a few questions I would like to ask you." Later, Izuku said before looking back at Bakugo. "Kaken, I will explain everything. I just need to do it someplace more private." Bakugo glared at him for a minute before saying, "Fine. Extras, fuck off." Almost instantly, all the students that had gathered to watch the fight scattered like they were running for their lives. After everyone left, Izuku spoke. Can we talk at your house? I think I should probably explain this to Aunt Mitsuki too." Bakugo scowled. On one hand, he didn't want to have to deal with the hag and Deku at the same time. But on the other hand, if the hag saw Tsukui call Deku father, then she would probably nag him for an explanation, and fuck that. "Fine," Bakugo said. "But don't walk too close to me. I don't want people thinking I know you." Later at Bakugo's house, "Izuku, it's been a while," said Mitsuki Bakugo. Bakugo, Tsukui, and Izuku were standing on the doorstep of the Bakugo's house with Mitsuki greeting them. "And who's this?" Mitsuki asked, looking at Tsukui. "Izuku, did you get a girlfriend?" Has stopped responding. The poor boy's face turned redder than ever as he emitted a bunch of high-pitched noises that sounded like he was attempting to speak but simply couldn't. "No," Tsukui said simply. "I am his daughter." Mitsuki started at her for half a minute before turning to Izuku. "Explain." "That's what they're here to do," Bakugo said. "Now let us in, it's fucking cold." They all sat down in the living room on the two couches, Izuku and Tsukui on one couch, and Mitsuki and Bakugo on the other. "So," Izuku started, "you know how I have no friends." Mitsuku frowned. "Yeah, assholes can't get over your quirklessness. Fuckers." Analyzation of the situation shows another possible reason for father's lack of friends. Tsukui chimed in. "Katsuki Bakugo seems to have a large amount of influence at the school and seems to bully father to some extent. Therefore, it's possible that because of this, people avoid father in order to make themselves targets." She figured all that out in just one day. Izuku, though, he was completely flabbergasted. "How well did I program her?" "Oh really?" Mitsuki said, glaring at her son. "Smack. Fuck," Bakugo yelled as he held the back of his head. "When they leave, you and I are gonna talk," Mitsuki said, a dangerously low tone. Bakugo swiftly regretted letting Izuku and Tsukui follow him home. Tsukui smiled. "It seems that my data on Mitsuki Bakugo is not as outdated as her son's." Izuku regained her composure and spoke up. "Be back to what I was saying. I got really lonely, so I made myself some company." Literally. The two Bakugos gave him confused looks, and Izuku realized he would need to clarify. "Maybe it would be better to show you what I mean," Izuku said before turning to Tsukui. 5798. Suddenly, Tsukui's arm opened up, revealing the metallic part beneath it. Both Mitsuki's and Bakugo's eyes were as wide as dinner plates when they saw this. "Wait, so she's a fucking robot?" Bakugo shouted. "Android," Tsukui corrected. "Well, technically she's a gynoid, but android sounds cooler," Izuku said. Mitsuki got up and took a close look at Tsukui. "She looks so alive, though." "Well, she is alive," Izuku clarified. "She's the world's first fully sentient android. She's just as alive as anyone." "How the fuck did you do that?" Mitsuki asked in shock. Well, it's complicated. But to put it simply, I just took a pair of brain waves and used them as a baseline for her program to make completely new brain waves. Mitsuki gave him another confused look before shaking her head and leaning back on the couch. I have no idea what any of that means, and I have a feeling I'll never understand any of it, but hey, good for you. At least you have a friend now. Or daughter, I guess. Father, I thought only your brainwaves were used in my creation. Yet you said that a pair of brainwaves was used. Who was the other person? Tsukui asked. Crap. Izuku thought to himself. I shouldn't have said that. Izuku stuttered. I'll tell you later. Father, you are aware you gave me a lie detector, right? Tsukui asked. I forgot about that. Izuku was starting to sweat. If he told Tsukui, then she would wonder how he got Bakugo's brainwaves, and then he would have to tell her about All for One. And Izuku really did not want anyone to know about his collaboration with that man. He was basically the embodiment of shady. First we should probably get your arm out of repair mode, Izuku said. Tsukui looked down at her opened-up arm. I didn't even know I had a repair mode. How many things about myself do I not know? 6973, Izuku said, ignoring her question. Tsukui looked down at her arm, but nothing happens. It remained in repair mode. Whoops, Izuku said. I said the wrong code. 7291. In an instant, Tsukui's arm closed up and returned to its normal state. Sorry about that, Izuku said. Really, Tsukui, I will tell you later. Your lie detector must be malfunctioning. Tsukui felt that something was off. It felt like her father was lying, but her lie detector was not going off. So he must be telling the truth. Right. Little did she know that when Izuku accidentally said the wrong code, what he really did was deactivate her lie detector. Izuku had a bunch of codes to deactivate or reactivate certain parts of Tsukui, all of which would only respond to his voice. Of course, there were also certain things Izuku could not deactivate, like her fusion reactor or her brainwave processor. Anyway, Izuku said in a somewhat nervous tone, I just wanted to tell you about her so you didn't get confused. We should be going now after I wouldn't want Mom to get upset. Izuku grabbed Tsukui by the hand and ran out of the Bakugo's house at speeds even Katsuki had never seen him run. After a few minutes, Mitsuki spoke. Something's not right. I don't think I've ever seen him act so shifty. Yeah, it's like he was hiding something, Bakugo added. Mitsuki shook her head. Whatever it is, it's probably best to just let it go. After all, it's Izuku. Whatever he's doing, I'm sure he would never dream of hurting someone. Meanwhile, with All Might, Toshinori Yagi was searching through his mail when he saw something that made his heart stop. A letter with the words from All for One to All Might. All Might immediately dropped all the other papers and shakily opened the letter. Dear All Might, how have you been? Not well, I hope. After all, I myself have not been doing very well, and it only gets worse every day. By the time you read this, I should already be 6 feet under. I'm sure you're leaping for joy, but I wouldn't be too quick to celebrate. You see, if there is one thing I would ever thank you for, it would be giving me something to do. There was a long time where I was so very bored with absolutely nothing to do. Then you showed up, ruined me completely, and gave me a brand new goal, making you suffer. For years I thought up various ways to hurt you. Kill that old man you call a teacher, ruin your public image, perhaps turn you detective friend into some kind of monster under my control. But one day an opportunity came to me. You remember Nana Shimura, right? Your former master, the one I killed, the one that died in a more pathetic way than any of the previous wielders of One for All. That Nana Shimura. Well, it just so happens that I stumbled across her grandson. He was suffering so much, and there were no heroes there to help him. So out the kindness of my heart, I took the boy in. Don't worry, he's doing well. I even gave him a special gift that I'm sure you'll be ecstatic to see. He has been very eager to meet you, and I'm sure you'll be seeing him very, very soon, so look forward to it. He might just be the last person you ever meet. Anyway, this is goodbye, All Might. My only regret was that I wasn't able to tear you to pieces myself. Sincerely, All for One. There was a mix of emotions that went through All Might as he read the letter, but the most prevalent among them was fear. I need to get this to Naomasa. Now, Tsukui couldn't be more excited. After 2 months of testing and running simulations, today was finally the day of the UA entrance exam. Are you ready? Izuku asked her as they walked to the gates of UA. Izuku was going to take the support course exam, so of course, the two walked there together, even if Izuku's exam wasn't for another hour after the hero exam. Of course, Father, Tsukui said. All systems are fully operational and ready for combat. All data on the entrance exam has been fully analyzed. Awesomeness level at 1000%. Tsukui stuck a confident pose. I am ready to be number 1. Did she really say awesomeness levels? Izuku thought to himself. Unfortunately, this distraction caused him to not see a rock in his path and trip. Tsukui was about to act when she saw someone rush past her. Izuku never hit the ground and instead found himself floating above the ground. Huh, Izuku said. Suddenly he found himself being lifted upright, face to face with a girl. A very pretty girl. Izuku's face turned crimson and his heart started beating at speeds that would put Ingenium to shame. Are you okay? The girl asked, concern showing on her face. What do I do? What do I do? What do I do? Izuku was freaking out hard. The girl then came closer. You look really red, are you sick? Unfortunately, she had gotten a bit too close for Izuku to handle, and so the boy collapsed onto the floor unconscious. What? Yelled the now extremely confused girl. Father, Tsukui shouted as she ran to her creator's aid. Wait, what? Asked the now even more confused girl. After confirming that her father was all right, Tsukui faced the girl. I apologize, she said. Father is not quite adept at social interactions. He is especially bad at speaking to members of the opposite sex. Okay, the girl said, still not sure what exactly was happening. Why did you call him father though? Because he is my father, Tsukui answered. But he looks like he's 15. The girl said, and you look like you're 15. Yes, Tsukui responded. There was a pause as the girl tried to comprehend the situation. Well, I need to go no by, the girl said, walking away from the two. What an interesting quirk she had, Tsukui thought to herself. Hey, Tsukui turned around to see Bakugo walking up behind them. What the fuck happened to him? He asked, looking at Izuku. He talked to a girl, Tsukui answered. There was a short pause before Bakugo just walked away. I think that may be the nicest interaction I've had with him, Tsukui thought to herself. Suddenly she realized something. The test is going to start soon. I'd better get father to a teacher so they can take him to the nurse or something. With that, Tsukui picked up Izuku and ran off to find a teacher. After a few minutes, she found Midnight directing students to the exam room. Tsukui yelled to get the teacher's attention. Midnight looked over to see Tsukui holding the still unconscious Izuku. She walked over to her and asked, what happened? He talked to a girl, Tsukui answered. Midnight cringed. Yikes, poor kid probably hasn't talked much to girls. Tsukui shook her head. He hasn't talked much to anyone really. Other than me, that is. Oh, are you his friend or sister or something? Midnight asked. I am his daughter, Tsukui answered. There was yet another pause as Midnight processed this unexpected answer. I am sorry, could you repeat that? Midnight asked, wondering if what she had was correct. I am his daughter, Tsukui repeated. He is my creator and therefore my father. It is very simple. Wait. What do you mean creator? Midnight asked. Like, are you part of his quirk or did he use his quirk to create you? Tsukui shook her head. No, father is quirkless. Perhaps it would be easier if I introduced myself. Suddenly Tsukui put her hands to her hips and gave Midnight a proud smile. I am Deku Midoriya, the first sentient android. And this is my father, the one who created me, Deku Midoriya. No one said anything as Midnight, as well as every other student around her, gave her strange and confused looks. Tsukui frowned. Do you not believe me? Here, let me show you. Tsukui reached for the back of her head, specifically for the small slit in her artificial skin, before opening it and revealing her metallic face to everyone around. Tada, she said. A few hours later, Izuku slowly and groggily opened his eyes a little. What happened? Hello, Midoriya, a voice said. Izuku looked up to see Principal Nezu himself sitting on the opposite end of a desk. Izuku's eyes shot fully open and he jerked upright. Principal Nezu. He nodded. Yup, that's me. So we heard that you created sentient life. Izuku's eyes somehow got even wider. How did you? She told us, said a man Izuku didn't recognize. My name is Naomasa Tsukachi. I've been brought in to make sure you're telling the truth. My quirk makes me a human lie detector, so lying won't work. What is it with me and lie detectors? Izuku thought to himself. And why did Tsukui tell them? I specifically told her to keep it a secret. So, Deku Midoriya, Nezu said, regaining the boy's attention. Our files say that Deku Midoriya was adopted by your mother and was homeschooled. However, looking at your mother's work schedule, that would be impossible. Now she has revealed herself to be an android and says you are her creator. Is this true? Izuku had no choice. With Naomasa here, lying was futile. Yes, he's telling the truth, Naomasa said with wide eyes. He almost didn't believe it. A 15-year-old boy creates life. It just sounded so bizarre. Well then, first I would like to congratulate you on this amazing scientific achievement, Nezu said. And next I would like to ask you a few more questions. Izuku gulped. Thank you, and I figured as much. First, why did you create her in the first place? Nezu asked. Izuku looked away sheepishly and muttered something. Please speak up, Nezu said. Because I was lonely, Izuku admitted. One of the many reasons Izuku wanted to keep this a secret was because of how pathetic it sounded. He couldn't make friends, so he had to make one himself. Naomasa frowned. It was a pretty sad answer, one that said a lot about Izuku and the life he lived. The fact that he was quirkless further painting a picture in the mind of the two adults about what his life was like. I see, Nezu said. Next question. Where did you get the resources to create her? She allowed us to analyze her, and while we were unable to look at her inner mechanisms, we can tell the materials and parts used in her creation would not have been available to someone who wasn't incredibly wealthy. Izuku started to sweat. He knew he probably wasn't getting out of here without telling them about All for One, but he had still held hope that he would be able to worm his way out of it. Well, you see, Izuku stuttered, trying to think of an answer. Someone showed up and offered me the resources. Naomasa gave the kid a suspicious look. You're telling the truth, but you're obviously hiding something. Kid, you know you're not getting out of this, just tell us everything. The pressure was too much. Izuku cracked. When I was looking for parts, a portal sucked me up and I met this man. He said his name was All for One. The statement sent shock throughout the room. Nezu even lost his ever-present smile. Naomasa looked at Nezu and the two nodded. Give us a moment, Nezu said. He and Naomasa walked outside his office. We need to call All Might, Nezu said. Half an hour later. Nezu, Naomasa, you said I was needed for something. All Might said as he walked into the office. Then he spotted Izuku and freaked out slightly. Hello there, young man. Hello, Izuku said. Yagi, this is Deku Midoriya, Nezu said, introducing the two. He is responsible for creating the world's first sentient android. Oh, All Might said. That's good. You have no idea what that means, do you? Naomasa asked. Not at all, All Might admitted. He made a robot that's alive. Nezu simplified. OHOH, All Might said, now giving the appropriate reaction. That's amazing. Yes, it's a miraculous achievement, Nezu said, praising the boy. However, it is also a suspicious one. Most suspiciously was how he managed to get his hands on the materials required to pull off such a feat. Midoriya, would you mind repeating what you said to Yagi? Izuku faced the skeleton like a man with fear written across his face. I was looking for parts when a portal showed up and swallowed me. After that, I met a man who said he would give me the parts I needed. His name was All for One. All Might's heart skipped a beat. What? All for One, Izuku repeated. He was a large man whose face was damaged, to the point where he basically didn't have one. He always had life support machines attached to him and an oxygen mask. He wore a dark suit and never seemed to change out of it. Dread filled All Might at the description. Last time he fought All for One, he caved the villain's head in. And all that resulted in was him not having a face. And he was still wearing that fucking suit. Were you aware that he was a villain? Naomasa asked. Izuku looked down, uncomfortable at being the center of attention. No, but I did suspect he was. And you continued to work with him despite that? Nezu asked. Tears started rolling down the boy's eyes as the pressure and attention was rapidly overwhelming him. I didn't have a choice. Do you know how impossible it is to make friends when you're quirkless? And my mom has to work 2 jobs so that way we can stay afloat money-wise. It was either work with him and make the androids or be alone for the rest of my life. Izuku was crying now. He really didn't want to work with All for One, but he justified it to himself by reminding himself that he didn't know if All for One was a villain, making excuses for his shifty behavior and evil laugh. But now here he was with all his suspicions confirmed, and Izuku felt guilty as hell. All Might gave the boy a look of pity. He knew exactly how hard it was to make friends when you're quirkless. All Might himself wasn't able to make any friends until Nana passed down one for all onto him. But while the word quirkless caught All Might's attention, there was another word that caught Nezu's attention. But before he could ask questions about it, he would have to calm down the boy first. Nezu pulled out a box of tissues and put them in front of the boy. It's okay, Midoriya. You had no idea that All for One was a villain, seeing as he is a government secret and listed as officially dead. You will not be arrested or anything like that. We just want information. This managed to calm Izuku down, if only slightly. He took the tissues and wiped away most of the tears and snot that had run down in his eyes and nose. I'm sorry, Izuku said, but deep down I did know that he was a villain. And, legally, since All for One is not publicly known, even if you did work with him, you still technically have not broken the law so long as you didn't perform any illegal actions yourself. Did you perform any illegal actions? And not to my knowledge, Izuku stuttered. But, then you're fine, Nezu said, cutting him off. You're not in any trouble, kid. But this feels wrong, Izuku yelled. I worked with a villain. I shouldn't just be able to get away with it. He felt a hand on his shoulder and he looked up to see All Might looking down at him. Young Midoriya, by answering our questions you could give us information that could lead to the dismantling of his plans. That is more than enough to make up for working with him. We questioned the young lady you created, Nezu said. She seems like a fine future hero that could save a lot of lives. Even if she is a result of you working with All for One, it is an undoubtedly positive thing. Izuku didn't know what to say, so he just cried some more. After 15 minutes, Izuku managed to stop crying. I want to ask you some more questions, Nezu said. Will you be able to answer them, or do you need a few more minutes? Izuku sniffed. I'm fine, thank you. All right. Now I noticed earlier you said androids, as in plural, Nezu pointed out. Izuku nodded. Yes, All for One said he would give me the materials and resources I needed to build Tsukui if I built him an android as well. What? All Might gasped. Can you tell us more about the android you made him? Nezu asked. Izuku nodded. He had a lot of requests for how he wanted it to look. He wanted it to have messy white hair, pale skin, and red eyes. He also wanted it to be a child somewhere between 9 of 11. Messy white hair, pale skin, and red eyes. Why does that sound familiar? All Might wondered. Also, I made Tsukui by using other people's brain waves as a baseline to form new brain waves, making them a whole new person, Izuku explained. But All for One wanted something different for his android. He asked me to use just those brainwaves, making it a copy of whoever they got the brainwaves from. But not only that, when I looked at the brainwaves, I found that they were cut off at a certain point. So it seems All for One wanted you to recreate a person, Nezu theorized, and he wanted that person to only remember up to a certain point, perhaps only up to they were a child. But why? Miyamasa asked. Did you give this android any weapons? Izuku shook his head. No, strangely enough, he asked specifically that he have no weapons systems whatsoever. It still has some super strength, but any pro hero would almost certainly be able to beat it. So if I had to guess, whoever he had me build had a strong sentimental connection to him. Suddenly it clicked. His brother. All Might yelled. Now he remembered why that description sounded familiar. The first user of One for All. He had seen him in a vision once and he matched that description exactly. It must be his brother. There isn't anyone else that monster could possibly have a connection to that strong enough to warrant going out of his way and revealing himself. I suppose that makes sense, Nezu said. Midoriya, when did you finish building these androids? About 2 months ago, Izuku answered. That's around the time All for One sent you that letter. Miyamasa realized. You're right, All Might said. But why would he revive his brother so close to his death? Wait, death? Izuku butt in. Well, I don't think he had much of a choice, Nezu said, ignoring Izuku completely. I don't think anyone but Izuku could basically revive the dead. I can't really revive the dead. Izuku butt in again. It's more like I created a copy of that person. Like a clone but made of metal. Also, what do you mean by close to his death? Yagi was sent a letter by All for One stating that he had just died. Miyamasa, and what you said about his injuries makes that seem more believable. Wait, why did he give Mr. Yagi a letter? Izuku asked. There was a brief silence in the room before Nezu spoke up. Midoriya, could you wait a moment while we talk outside? The principal said. Sure, Izuku said. He felt like he was in way over his head. The adults left the room once more and stood outside of the office. What are we gonna tell him? All Might asked. Everything, Nezu said. The two looked at him like he was crazy. Nezu, do you really want to tell all these important, dangerous secrets to a 15-year-old? Miyamasa asked. That could make him a target. He created life. Nezu pointed out. He will never not be a target now. He also already knows about All for One, and I have a plan for him that would require him to know about these things. And what plan is that? All Might asked. Just trust me, Nezu said. The other two sighed. They hated when Nezu tried to be dramatic. Well, you're the one with the intelligence quirk, Miyamasa said. The adults walked back into the room. All right, Midoriya, we have some very important things to tell you, Nezu said. These things are to remain top secret at all times. You are not allowed to tell anyone about what you hear in this room today. Do you understand? Izuku gulped and nodded his head. What have I gotten myself into? What's taking so long? Tsukui wondered as she waited on the couch at home. After she had delivered her brother to the heroes, she had been asked if they could analyze her. She said yes and had to go through hours of testing and questioning. Afterward, they put her through the UA entrance exam, except with just her participating. Then they just told her she was in. No waiting or suspense, they just told her she was in. That honestly didn't sit right with her. It was pretty obvious they were treating her differently because she was an android, which in hindsight it was pretty obvious that something like this would happen. But what else was she supposed to do? Keep it a secret as her father wanted. Tsukui found that hiding her species, I guess you could call it, was a waste of time and effort. If she got significantly burned, then her fake skin was gone and she would be exposed. After the test, they sent her home. She protested, saying that she wanted to wait for her father, but they said it would be a while until they were done with him and insisted that she went home. Many hours later, and her father had still yet to return, and Tsukui was tempted to walk up to UA and bang on the door. Suddenly the door opened and in walked her father. Why did you tell them? He yelled. Tsukui shrugged. Trying to hide it is pointless. The minute my fake skin gets torn or burnt off, then everyone knows anyway. It just seemed like a lot of effort for something that ultimately won't matter. Though, Izuku deflated. When she put it like that, it made what she did seem somewhat logical. Tsukui noticed a briefcase in her father's hand. What's that? Izuku looked at the briefcase. This is a bunch of papers that me and Mom have to go through. Also my diploma. Wait, what? Tsukui yelled in shock. Izuku sighed. Nezu said that me going through the support course would be a waste of everyone's time, seeing as I'm already so smart. So he put me in the support course and then immediately graduated me. Wow, Tsukui said. I see why people say Nezu is so smart. It's about time you got the recognition you deserve. Izuku blushed. Asked Tsukui. I didn't really do anything worth recognition until I made you. The door opened again and Inko walked in. Oh, hi Mom, Izuku said. Inko gave an exhausted smile. Hello Izuku, Tsukui. Hello, grandmother, Tsukui said. Mom, we need to talk, Izuku said. Inko yawned. Izuku, I'm really tired. Can't this wait until later? Izuku shook his head rapidly. No mom, this is really, really important. Does it have to do with those papers you were talking about? Tsukui asked. Yes, Izuku said, opening up the briefcase. These are government papers that you and I need to sign so I can work for UA. Oh, is that all? Inko said. She tiredly walked up to the table, pulled out a pen and signed the spots on the paper that said parent sign here. Good night, Inko said as she walked away. Mom, do you know what you just signed? Izuku asked. Inko didn't respond and just walked into her room. Izuku sighed. We'll just explain it to her in the morning. The next morning, after one explanation. I signed what? Inko screeched. It was a waiver allowing me to work at UA. Izuku repeated. Because I'm still only 15 UA. And the government wanted your permission before I could officially work at UA. But Inko stuttered. You're too young to be. Mom, I know you're concerned, but if you look right here, Izuku said, pointing to a spot on the contract, you'll see how much I'd be getting paid. Inko looked, and after seeing the number, her eyes widened. Oh my god. After this, you won't have to work 2 jobs, Izuku said excitedly. You won't have to work any job. But, Izuku, the contract says you'll be an engineer. What does that involve? Inko asked. Izuku cringed. I can't tell you. Well, why? Inko asked. Because it involves a lot of top secret things that I will never be allowed to tell you, Izuku explained. But let me just say this. I will be building stuff. That's really vague, Inko said. Are you really sure about this? Izuku nodded. Yes, and besides I a graduate now, so I need to find a job anyway. Inko looked hesitant, but she saw the determined look in her son's eye and knew she only had one choice. Inko sighed. Well, I already signed the paper. Izuku jumped for joy and then hugged his mother. Thank you. Inko smiled and hugged her son back. I have to go to work, honey. After all, I feel like I should quit in person. Izuku smiled as a few tears of joy dropped from his eyes. I have to go to UA and give them the papers. After the two separated, Inko left for work and Izuku was at the door. Father, Tsukui said, getting his attention. Let me come with you. Izuku smiled. Okay, I don't think my job is gonna start today, so it should be fine. Later at UA, Izuku and Tsukui walked to the gates and found that Nezu was waiting for them. Good morning, Midoriya, Nezu said. Good morning, Principal Nezu, Izuku said. Nezu turned to Tsukui. And good morning to you, Tsukui. Hello, Tsukui said. I hope your mother signed those papers, Nezu said. Izuku handed Nezu the briefcase. She did, and I added the list of materials and other things I'll need for the project. Nezu opened the case and looked through a bunch of papers. Good. We'll order the supplies immediately. Izuku smiled. Thank you. The sooner we get this done, the better. That's right, Nezu said. If you know who is alive, God knows what he's doing. Meanwhile, with you know who, all for one side. Another easy day of farming. For most people, working a huge farm by yourself would be an almost impossible task. But for all for one, this was simple. He went back to the farmhouse. Joy and Eri were at school, so the only sounds in the large barn were the sounds of the farm animals and the wind. All for one side. To think, after all these years I would get a happy ending. I almost can't believe it. I half expect All Might to burst through the wall and ruin everything. The thought of All Might made All for one chuckle. I wish I could have seen the look on his face when he read that letter. The former villain used his telekinesis quirk to push Bucket underneath the cows and milk them using the same quirk. While he was doing that, the duplicates that he created that morning were planting seeds in the fields. All this while All for one was collecting eggs from the chickens. You know, this is a nice change of pace, he thought to himself. Doing one thing for so long gets boring after all. I wonder what I'll do after All Might and his compatriots have died and everyone forgets about me. Maybe I'll be a teacher or a doctor, or perhaps I'll go into the hero business myself. All for one had to keep himself from bursting into hysterical laughter so he wouldn't drop the eggs. As funny as that would be if I did that, I have no doubt Yoi would put on a cape and insist to be my sidekick. And like hell I'm allowing that. All for one had told his brother that he did indeed develop a quirk. He called it Metal Body, which made him stronger and more durable while also making him immortal. Unsurprisingly, he had bought it and spent the rest of the week making him regret telling him he had increased durability and strength. He would do stupid things like banging his head against walls, jumping off the top of the barn, and other things that made his older brother want to rip his hair out. Thank God for Eri though. After Yoi almost set himself on fire, it only took one look at Eri crying hysterically for him to cut out his testing. I wonder if I could keep her alive forever. She has been rather useful. All for one pondered. Her quirk doesn't seem to work on herself, but perhaps I can find a way around that. She and Yoi are quite attached. It would be strange if they developed romantic feelings for each other only for Eri to grow into an adult and Yoi to stay a child. All for one shivered at the thought. Maybe I can have Midoriya turn her into a robot or something. Although if he doesn't know about me already, he certainly will soon. There's no way that walking bundle of nerves is keeping his collaboration with me a secret. Hopefully, Tamura will distract them so they don't pay me any attention. And even if they don't, I have this town to keep me protected. The town of Hitajichi was a nice little town. small enough to the point where everyone knew each other's name but big enough to be comfortable spacing-wise. While it was pretty remote, but it was still up-to-date technology-wise. It was a pleasant town with pleasant people, innocent people, people who the heroes would want to keep safe. And if any heroes tried to pull any funny business, they would get one warning before he reduced the town to a crater. Yoi should be durable enough to survive the blast so long as he wasn't directly hit by it, and he was sure that regardless of Midoriya's opinion of him, the boy would never allow someone as innocent as Yoi to die and wound repair him. Her would losery, but what could you do? Maybe her head would survive and he could convince Midoriya to make a robot duplicate of her. Although All For One was sure he wouldn't need to think about that. Any hero worth their salt would never risk that many lives, and any heroes that would All For One could take out without needing to blow up the town. All in all, it was a foolproof requirement plan. He had nothing to fear. A few hours later, All For One was slightly afraid. It had been 3 hours since school let out, but Yoi and Eri had yet to return. All For One had a scanner quirk that allowed him to know the location of everyone in town. Everyone but Yoi, most likely due to the fact that he is a machine. Eri had been running around the town, but All For One had no idea why or if Yoi was with her. He sensed her coming back and crossed his fingers that Yoi was with her. The two children walked through the barn door and All For One breathed a sigh of relief. "Where have you two been?" All For One demanded. "You're 3 hours late. Do you have any idea how concerned I was?" The two hung their heads, Yoi in shame and Eri in fear. "Sorry, bro," Yoi said. "I was helping out around the town and it took longer than I thought." All For One sighed. "Oh, of course. How could I forget that heroic nature of his?" This same heroic nature had gotten the original Yoi in plenty of trouble and didn't look like Midoriya programmed that out of him. Sorry," Eri strutted. The girl was always on guard around him. She knew that he was evil. He just eliminated this sinister aura that Eri knew she couldn't trust. She didn't dislike him. After all, he did save her from overhaul, but she always got the feeling that at any moment he was going to eat her. All For One shook his head. "It's fine. Next time just tell me before you do something like this again." "Of course," Yoi exclaimed. "Why yeah," Eri said. The former villain smiled. "Well, you two go upstairs. I'll call you when dinner is ready." Yoi and Eri ran upstairs to their shared room. "Hey, Eri," Yoi said. "You seemed kind of nervous. You okay?" "Why yeah," Eri stuttered. Yoi frowned and walked over to her. "Hey, it's okay. Big bro might be scary sometimes, but it's cool. You don't need to worry, and if he gets angry I'll take all the blame for whatever happens." Yoi gave her a determined smile. Eri teared up a little bit. She still wasn't used to this, to someone being so nice to her. She hugged Yoi and Yoi hugged back. "I'll never let anyone hurt you again, Eri. I promise." Back with Izuku and Tsukui, the two of them were preparing for bed. Inko had offered to get Tsukui her own bed, but Tsukui said she would just sleep with her father, much to his embarrassment. "Tsukui," Izuku said, gaining her attention. "There is something I need to tell you." Tsukui smiled. "At last some answers. The other half of your brain waves, they come from Kaken," Izuku revealed. Tsukui's smile dropped. What? Why? Well, Kaken had a lot of determination, and I admired that a lot, so when it came time to make your brainwaves I figured I might as well use some of his too," Izuku explained. Tsukui was dumbstruck. She had no real expectation of who he got those brainwaves from, but she didn't think it would be that asshole. "How?" she yelled. "How did you even get his brainwaves? I doubt he would agree to something like that." Izuku started looking around nervously, avoiding eye contact. "Well, you see, I can't tell you that. Basically, all the information on your creation is top secret, even to you." "But that's bullshit," Tsukui said. "Why can't I know how I was created?" Izuku sighed. "Maybe because you're really bad at keeping secrets." Tsukui wanted to protest, but she couldn't really argue with that. Literally the only secret she had been asked to keep, she had told to basically everyone. The internet had exploded with news of a robot girl with green hair. There weren't any pictures, but she doubted that anyone wouldn't recognize her as the one everyone was talking about. "UGHHH," Tsukui groaned. "All of this was so frustrating." "I'm sorry for all the complicated stuff," Izuku said. "It's pretty hard for me to comprehend. But it's important. Really important." Tsukui just pouted, but suddenly she realized something. "Does that mean that he's my mom?" Izuku went pale. No. He is like an uncle or something. His contribution was really minor and could have been kept out for the most part. Please never call him that." Tsukui gave a sigh of relief. "Good. I would rather have literally anyone else be my mom. Then again, seeing how you are with girls, I doubt that will ever happen." Izuku turned red with embarrassment. Asked Tsukui. She rolled her eyes and went up to Izuku. "Well, time for bed." Izuku found himself being picked up and thrown into the bed. "Why didn't I see this coming?" Tsukui jumped in bed and wrapped her arms around her father's neck, making him struggle to breathe. "Good night, father," Tsukui said with a smug grin on her face. "Well, it's still better than being alone." Tsukui was bursting with energy. Figuratively, of course. If her power source was overloading, then Izuku would have had her stay home. Today would be her first day at UA. She would get to meet her classmates, learn about their quirks, and if she was lucky she might even get to spar with them. You're really not nervous at all? Izuku asked. The two had been walking to UA together and were nearly there, only about a mile away. The two were already familiar with the route as Izuku had been working there for a while now and Tsukui always walked with him. Of course not, Tsukui said. I get to make new friends, see new quirks, train to become a hero. What could I be nervous about? Izuku gave her a surprised look for a moment before smiling. I guess when you put it like that you really do have nothing to fear. You're you after all. Tsukui grinned. And you built me this way so you have to take credit for my amazingness too. Izuku turned red. Well, I mean. Suddenly Izuku found himself getting hoisted over Tsukui's shoulder. I want to get there early so we need to go, she said before speeding off. Tsukui, Izuku yelled as his already red face turned crimson from being carried. Later, Tsukui scanned the halls looking for her classroom. It didn't take her long as the entrance was a large door with one eye on it. She stood in front of the door with a large grin on her face. All right, this is it. My class for the next 3 years, Tsukui said to herself. She opened the door. Take your feet off the desk, shouted a blue-haired boy. It is disrespectful to the students who previously used them. Bakugo glared at him. Who the fuck cares? Fuck, Tsukui said. All the joy she had was gone after seeing Bakugo. He may have been part of her creation process, but he was still an asshole. Language, the boy said, marching up to her. Future heroes should not use such deplorable language. Tsukui shook her head. I apologize. It's just me and him don't have a good history. How long have you known him? About 2 minutes, the boy said. Then you already have a grasp on his personality, Tsukui said, shooting Bakugo a smug look. In response, Bakugo flipped her off and said nothing. Tsukui gasped. That's the nicest thing he's said to me. Bakugo was about to curse at her when a large green caterpillar appeared in the doorway. Everyone turned to look at it. No one saying anything when suddenly something started coming out of it. Turns out it was a sleeping bag containing a racer head. If you're done acting like preschoolers, I would like to start class, he said. Most of the students were wondering who exactly this was, but Tsukui already knew. Eraserhead, she squealed. So cool. Eraserhead raised an eyebrow, surprised that somebody recognized him. Then he realized that this was the android that he had been told about. He decided to ignore it and move on. Get changed and meet me outside in the field, he said, getting right to the point. This shocked the class, who was not used to such an approach. But what about orientation? Uraraka said. Waste of time, Eraserhead said. Before anyone could say anything else, he walked out of the room, leaving them all speechless, except for Tsukui, who stood up and started walking out before realizing her class was in shock. Judging from the data I have on Eraserhead's teaching style, we are all in for a very interesting year, she said to everyone before turning and leaving. Later in the girls' locker room, Momo Yaoyorozu felt very uncomfortable. She was somewhat used to getting stared at by both men and females alike, but something about Tsukui's gaze was unusual. The girl's gaze was fixed on her chest, but unlike most people who looked at her with envy or perviness, she seemed to be looking at her with curiosity. Could Yao stop looking at my chest? She asked uncomfortably. Tsukui's eyes shot up to Momo's eyes. Sorry. She then looked up at the ceiling for a few moments before getting a determined look in her eye and saying, for science. She then walked right out of the girls' locker room. I have a bad feeling about what's about to happen next, Ochako said. Later outside, all the students had gathered outside waiting for their teacher. The boys were giving Tsukui some strange looks though, ranging from glares to winks. Midoriya, Ada yelled at Tsukui. Bursting into the men's locker room is against the rules. It is also shameful behavior for a student of UA. You did what? Yelled most of the girls, except for Mina, who snickered. I wished to test my sexuality, Tsukui explained. I had no particular attraction towards the females, so I tried the males. There was no attraction there either. Wait, so you're asexual? Toru asked. Tsukui shrugged. No clue. I'll have to ask father. Ask me what? Everyone looked in front of them to see Eraserhead and Izuku walking toward them. Izuku was now in a white lab coat and green shirt with blue jeans. Deku, Bakugo yelled. The fuck are you doing here? Language, Ida yelled, chopping the air. Shove it, glasses. Bakugo snarled. White, Eraserhead yelled, activating his quirk. Bakugo grumbled but didn't say anything. Good, Eraserhead said, deactivating his quirk. This is Izuku Midoriya. He is an engineer at UA. What? Yelled everyone but Tsukui and Todoroki. The latter just looked at him with wide eyes. But he's the same age as us, Mina shouted. Shouldn't he graduate first before getting a job? Kaminari asked. He did graduate, Tsukui said. He graduated on the same day of the entrance exam. WHHAAT, yelled most of the class again. How the hell did Deku graduate before me? Bakugo yelled. Well, when you're smart enough to create life, high school just seems unnecessary, Eraserhead said. WHHHAAT, yelled the class again. This time even Todoroki joined in. Wait, Kaminari said. His name's Midoriya. And can I call you Sukui? Sukui nodded. Sukui's name is Midoriya. Kaminari continued. And when Suku said she needed to ask her dad, that guy said that he was her father. Plus there are those rumors about that robot girl. Oh my god, Sukui's a robot. Mina yelled. Momo spoke up. That seems a little far-fetched. Correct. Eraserhead said Izuku was the one who built Sukui and as such UA allowed his to graduate immediately. Afterward, he was offered a job at UA as an engineer. Now that's dealt with, let's move on. If you have more questions you can ask him after the lesson. But I have so many questions, Mina said, saying what most of the class was thinking. Moving on, Eraserhead said more forcefully. I was going to have a quirk apprehension test. But Nezu and Midoriya had other ideas. Before anyone could ask anything, Izuku pulled out a big red button from his coat and then pressed it. Suddenly the ground started shaking, and All Might came out bursting out of the ground. What the fuck? Bakugo yelled. Combat test. Go, Eraserhead said. Before any of them could react, All Might charged at the class and was about to punch Mina. Just before she got hit, Kirishima stepped in front of her and hardened his arms, blocking the hit. Holy crap, holy shit, we have to fight freaking All Might. Minta yelled. Sukui blasted All Might with her laser eyes, knocking him back, and Sato followed up by eating a bunch of sugar, then landing a right hook on him. All Might recovered and charged Sato, tackling him and throwing him aside. Before he could do anything else, however, he was fully encased in a huge chunk of ice. That won't hold him for long, Todoroki said. We need a plan fast. The pressure increased as the students could hear the sounds of ice breaking, knowing that soon All Might would be free. This is not All Might, Sukui said, causing everyone to look at her in confusion. All Might is much stronger and faster than this, and my sensors detect that our foe is not holding back. And given that my father is here, our opponent is most likely a robot. So we're not fighting All Might? Minta asked hopefully. Sukui shook her head. No, Todoroki grunted as he added another layer of ice to stall the fake All Might. While that's useful to know, we still need a plan. Just blast him, Sukui said. A combined assault from all of us should be able to destroy this thing. TT, I don't need your fucking help. I could beat this fake by myself. Bakugo yelled. Sukui rolled her eyes. While Bakugo could probably beat this thing by himself, it would not be easy. At that moment the fake All Might broke free of ice. Although it was not undamaged, the ice seemed to have done a number on it, and its fake skin was torn in several places, including its eye. Sato, Kirishima, can you hold it in place? Sukui asked. The two nodded and charged at the robot. I can help, Uraraka said, running off with them. The fake All Might charged at Uraraka, but Kirishima blocked its punch. Sato took this opportunity to grab its arms, holding it in place. Uraraka then touched the automaton, causing it to float. Sato threw it up in the air, making it completely vulnerable. Unfortunately, it started floating out of range. It's going out of range, Sukui yelled. Not on my watch, Siro said, using his tape to wrap it up and keep it from floating any further. Now, Sukui signaled, letting off a full-power eye blast. Don't tell me what to do, Bakugo shouted while sending a high-power blast at the fake. Momo shot a cannonball from the cannon she made, and Aoyama unleashed his naval laser. These attacks all landed and blew the machine to bits. Once the smoke from the attack cleared, there was nothing but a bunch of floating bits of metal. Release, Urikara said, making the metal fall to the ground. We did it, Minta cheered. You didn't really do anything, Siro muttered. Sukui crossed her arms in a proud stance, with a smug grin on her face. And it was all thanks to my plan. You're welcome. Like I said, I could have destroyed that thing on my own. Bakugo snarled. Is he always an asshole? Kaminari asked. Congratulations, Eraserhead said sarcastically. You finished the warm-up. Now on to the real test. Wait, what? Mina said. Izuku pulled out another button from his other pocket and pressed it. Suddenly the ground started shaking again, this time much more violently. Then 10 more All Might robots popped out of the ground. Oh come on, Mina shouted. AHHH, Minta screamed in terror. The fake All Mights charged them all, scattering them and splitting them up. One of the robots was about to punch Ochako, but Sukui blasted them with a full power blast, knocking it to the side. Sukui kept blasting the robot, destroying its fake flesh and burning the metal. Then the beam stopped. Optic beams reaching overheating level. Need to go on cooldown. Damn it, Sukui thought as the robot charged her. Just before it reached it suddenly started floating. Sukui took this opportunity to punch the robot into the air. Sukui looked at Ochako, who let out a sigh of relief. Made it. Thank you, Sukui said, smiling at the girl. You saved me first. Ochako smiled back. Sukui looked up at the now flying robot. In 5 seconds I'll be able to unleash another blast. I'm going to go into overcharge mode and destroy him in one go. Ochako nodded. 5, Sukui said. 4, Ochako said. 3, 2, 1, release. Ochako yelled, bring her fingertips together. Gravity returned to the robot and it fell down to earth. Izuka stood underneath the robot and looked up. Nova blast. Sukui yelled as she unleashed a massive blast from her eyes, up at the robot. The fake All Might was consumed by the blast and was obliterated. Ochako looked up at the blast with wide eyes, before looking back at Tsukui, whose eyes were smoking. Tsukui looked back and was delighted by the shocked expression Ochako was wearing. Cool, huh? Tsukui said. Yeah, Ochako said excitedly. Why didn't you do that earlier? Oh, simple. If I use it, then I won't be able to use my optic blast for an hour. Tsukui answered. Oh, Ochako said. Meanwhile, Kirishima held off one of the fake All Mights, protecting Mina, who was behind him, and Minta, who was behind her. The fake punched him again, chipping away at Kirishima's defense. A little help here. Kirishima grunted as the robot whittled away at his quirk. Mina turned to Minta. What does your quirk do? I have sticky balls, Minta said nervously. Mina would have laughed if it wasn't for the situation she was in. All right, you stick him, I'll melt him. What? Minta yelled. I can't. Kirishima was knocked back a little as he tried to hold back the robot. AHHH, Minta yelled. He threw his balls right behind the robot in a panicked fashion. Kirishima saw this opportunity and took the offense. Red Gauntlet. He punched the robot at full power, putting a small dent in its chest and knocking it onto Minta's balls. The robot struggled, trying to free itself but to no avail. Mina smiled. My turn. She then doused the robot in acid, melting it down until it exploded. Yes, Mina cheered. She looked at Kirishima and Minta. High five. Kirishima and Mina high-fived while Minta tried in vain to jump up and join. Meanwhile, Ajiro narrowly dodged another punch. The robot was no fighter, it just swung randomly at the tailed boy. Ajiro used this to his advantage and managed to block or deflect the fake's blows. Dark Shadow, Takoyami yelled. Bind him. Dark Shadow shot out from Takoyami's body and wrapped around the robot's body. Unfortunately, one of its arms was free. It was about to punch Dark Shadow, but Tsuyu's tongue wrapped around it and kept it in place. Gyro now. Send him to the void. Takoyami yelled. Gyro ran up next to the barely contained robot and shoved one of her earphone jacks in the thing's ear. She let off a full-volume blast of sound in the thing's head, making it explode and its body to fall to the ground. Yes, Gyro cheered. Meanwhile, Sato was holding off one of the robots, but he could only so much damage and his quirk was starting to take its toll on him. Hey, said Toru, close your eyes. Me and the French dude have a plan. Sato nodded and shut his eyes. Toru unleashed a flash of bright light, causing the robot's optic center to go into overload. Grab him from behind, Toru yelled. Sato opened his eyes and saw that the robot was blinded. He went behind him and put him into a hold. Now, Toru said, prepare to be dazzled. Aoyama said, unleashing a powerful blast at the robot's head, destroying it. Wahoo, Torture doing a victory dance no one could see. We did it. Aoyama smiled as he silently hoped this would be over soon so he could use the bathroom. Meanwhile, one of the robots was rapidly attempting swat away a flock of birds summoned by Koda to distract the machine. Then Zero took this chance to wrap the thing in tape, leaving it defenseless. Kaminari smirked and ran up to the huge robot, before jumping on top of it. Get the birds out, Kaminari said. Koda nodded. Fly away, my friends. The birds dispersed and Kaminari grinned. Indiscriminate discharge 1,300,000 volts. He yelled, unleashing a massive burst of electricity causing the machine to explode and Kaminari was knocked into the air. Luckily, he was caught by Dark Shadow who brought him down safely. You okay, dude? Zero asked. Wait. Kaminari responded with a stupid look on his face. Probably just quirk kickback, Zero said. Hopefully. Meanwhile, Shoji held the struggling robot in place, using his quirk to wrap his tentacle-like arms around it, while Ida ran in wide circles around them. Ida had said it would take him a while to get into full gear, so Shoji had to hold him off while he got there. After a few more seconds, Ida reached his top speed and ran full force at the two. Recipro burst. He yelled as he kicked the robot's head off. Shoji let go of the robot's limp body and gave Ida a thumbs up. Meanwhile, Bakugo was getting his ass kicked. Perhaps taking on two of these things at once wasn't the best idea, but like hell, he was going to let anything Deku made beat him. He hit one of them with an explosion, knocking it back, only for the other one to punch him in the face, causing him to go flying and land on his back. The robot tried to stomp Bakugo, but he rolled out of the way and was about to retaliate when the other robot kicked him. Bakugo rolled across the ground using his explosions to stop himself. He got up and the robots ran at him. Just as he was about to unleash a strong explosion at the both of them, two EMPs were thrown on both the robots' heads, causing them to shake and malfunction until they just both deactivated. Bakugo looked back to see that it was Momo who had done them in. I didn't need your fucking help, Bakugo yelled. Momo ignored that. We need to help Todoroki. He also took on two of them in. Bakugo rolled his eyes. Look behind you, dumbass. Momo looked behind her and saw that Todoroki had impaled both the robots on ice spikes. Oh, Momo said. All the robots were defeated as many of the students cheered and celebrated. Izuku looked at Eraserhead. So do they have potential? Eraserhead sighed. These robots were tough. Even he would have a difficult time taking them out. For these kids to take down 10 of them proved that they had what it took to be heroes, which meant that Eraserhead would actually have to do his job this time. Yeah, alright, Eraserhead shouted, getting the students' attention. You all proved you had at least some semblance of skill, so none of you are getting expelled for now. Go change, then you're dismissed. The students ran off, leaving a smiling Izuku and a grumpy Eraserhead. Later in the girls' locker room. So are you really a robot? Mina asked Tsukui, looking all over her body for any robotic parts. Yep, Tsukui said, happy to have another chance to talk about herself. The world's first fully sentient android. I dunno, you look human to me, Gyro said skeptically. In response, Tsukui reached for the opening in her artificial skin and took it off, revealing her metallic face. I take it back, you're definitely a robot, Gyro said. That explains why you called that guy father when we met, Achako said. I was so confused when that happened. I thought you guys were just weird. Well, I would hardly call a teenager making a scientific breakthrough that's leaps and bounds above anything else in his field normal, Momo said. Suddenly the door slammed open and a pink-haired girl rushed in. Where is she? The girl yelled before her eyes landed on Tsukui. It's true, she said in a whispery tone as she walked right up to Tsukui. You're real. The marvel of technology I've dreamed about for years is real. The girl looked all around her body, not caring where her hands went, making all the other girls go wide-eyed as their classmate was being felt up. Ooh, I get I amazing, but slow down a bit, Tsukui said. She didn't mind the girl was doing she was doing. She was just really confused. Oh, my name is Meihatsu. Please let me see inside you, she said. Phrasing, Mina yelled. Sure, Tsukui said. Huh, responded most of the girls. My father will probably want to do a rundown on my systems after I get changed, Tsukui explained. You can come if want. Yes, Mei said, drooling slightly. Later at Izuku's new lab. Izuku's new lab was a small building on UA's campus that was made recently for him. It was large and filled with all sorts of machines to do various things. Tsukui opened the door and Izuku, who was working on something, looked at her. Oh, Tsukui, Izuku said, smiling. You're just in time for. Suddenly he was tackled by a pink streak and fell to the floor with something on top of him. Something very soft. He looked up to see Mei on top of him with her boobs right in his face. All the color drained from his face. You're the person who made her, Mei said, not caring about his age. That's incredible. Please let me help you make your babies. It was that day Izuku had a near-death experience at the hands of boobs and poorly phrased sentences. Tsukui sighed. Her coding must have a glitch if she didn't see this coming. What happened? Toru asked, looking ahead of her to see Izuku knocked out with Mei shaking his body. Father is very shy around girls, Tsukui explained. If a girl so much as gets too close to him for too long. And Hatsum just said she wanted to have his babies. Fucking lucky, Minta yelled. Oh, right, I remember he passed out after I met him, Achako said. Meanwhile, Mina rubbed her hands in glee. She was gonna have so much fun. So if a chick rubs her boobs on him he conks out, Kaminori asked. Yup, the only females, he's not a complete nervous wreck around me and his mother, Tsukui said. That's a little pathetic, Shiro said. Well, if people avoid you like the plague, then it's logical that you would be shy and socially awkward, Tsukui defended, glaring slightly at Shiro. Why would people avoid him? Momo asked. He is clearly very intelligent, so why would people stay away from him? Tsukui sighed. This is where she got to see what classmates she could get along with and which ones she would hate. He's quirkless. Everyone seemed surprised by this. Wait, you mean he doesn't have a quirk? Kaminori asked. No, she meant the type of quirkless where you still have a quirk, Gyro said sarcastically. Well, I mean it's just weird, Kaminori said. I mean, I knew they existed but I never met one until now. I agree, it is rather surprising, Momo said. I was sure he had some sort of intelligence quirk. I was too, Shoji said. However, this does make his creation of Tsukui more impressive. Agreed, Ida said. So no one wanted to be around him because he's quirkless, Achako said. That's terrible. Indeed, Ajiro said. He had been teased a few times for not having a very impressive quirk, so he can only imagine what would happen to someone without a quirk at all. Wait, so none of you have a problem with him being quirkless? Tsukui asked, slightly bewildered by how accepting they were. Of course not, Mina said. Judging someone for that would be stupid and highly unheroic, Ida added. Everyone seemed to be in agreement, which surprised Tsukui a lot. From what she knew of people, she had expected at least one person here to be an asshole. Maybe Bakugo had enough asshole energy for two people, Tsukui thought. Come on, wake up, Mei yelled as she continued to shake Izuku. Tsukui sighed. Can any of you wake him up? Allow me, Momo said, holding up some smelling salts she made. Tsukui smiled. I'm gonna ask you some questions about your quirk later, but for now. Tsukui walked up to Mei and using all her strength she managed to pry Mei off of her creator. Let me go, Mei yelled, struggling to escape Tsukui's grip. I need to know how to make babies like him. You're never gonna find that out if you don't stop making him pass out, Tsukui pointed out. And just like that, Mei stopped, with a look of realization on her face. Oh yeah, How do I do that? Don't get too close to him and stop talking for 5 minutes, Tsukui said. Okay, Mei said. She didn't like having to wait, but she would if it meant learning a whole new way to make her babies. All right now, Momo, if you would please, Tsukui said. Momo looked at her strangely, clearly not used to the nickname. What? Your name is too freaking long and I don't want to call you by your first name yet, Tsukui explained. Momo nodded, still unsure about it, but not against it. She walked up to Izuku and slipped the smelling salts under his nose. Instantly Izuku's eyes opened and he jumped into an upright sitting position. Izuku said. What happened? Girls, Tsukui said. Izuku looked at Tsukui to see that Mei and the rest of Class 1 had followed her. Izuku quickly crawled back, somewhat frightened by the number of people in front of him. Sure, he had seen them all before, but they were focusing on the robots rather than him at that time. Class 1A, Izuku said in shock before looking at Mei. And you are? Her name is Mei Hatsume. She's a machine nut who seems to refer to her creations as her babies, Tsukui explained before Mei could get a word in. Oh, I see, Izuku said, feeling embarrassed. That explains a lot. But we did the rest of your class come. We wanted to see the person who made our classmate, Todoroki said. I for one was curious about how you managed to accomplish such a task with little to no resources. That's top secret, Izuku answered nervously. As I suspected, Todoroki said. So you made Tsukui? Gyro asked, still having a hard time believing that. Why yeah, Izuku said, looking away from them. That's so cool, Toru said. So you can just make people anytime you want. Well, it takes a while, but so long as I have the resources then yes, Izuku said. So can you make a robot me? Mina asked. I mean, I could make a robot duplicate of you. I could even make it think like you to the point where no one would even know the difference. Even the duplicate, Izuku said. There was a pause as Izuku slowly realized how scary and creepy that sounds. I mean I would never do that though. Izuku quickly clearfield. And even if I wanted to, which I don't, Yue would have to know about it and would probably never approve of it. Probably, Gyro asked. Well, Izuku stuttered quickly, getting overwhelmed by all the attention. Hey, slow down, Kirishima said, getting in front of everyone. A guy doesn't have much experience with people and it's not mainly to walk into someone's place and make them uncomfortable. Thank you, Kirishima, Tsukui said. I should have run through the possibilities a bit before I agreed to bring you all here at once. Sorry, Toru said. Yeah, me too, should have toned it down a bit, Mina said. It's fine, just not used to so much attention. Or any attention, Izuku said. Now that things were significantly uncomfortable, Tsukui thought for a few moments before coming up with an idea. So father, can we do the rundown, diagnostic later? I would like to get to know some of my new classmates. Sure, Izuku said, frowning a little. Fool, and while I do that you can talk to Hatsume, Tsukui said. What? Izuku said as Hatsume's eyes gleamed and she had to force herself even harder to not say anything. Now just remember to stay at least a foot away from him and not to say anything suggestive, Tsukui said. Have fun. Tsukui let go of Mei and immediately she ran in front of Izuku asking questions rapid fire. All right, let's go, Tsukui said, leading the class out of the building. When they got out, Kirishima asked a question. Don't you think that Hatsume chick is gonna overwhelm him or make him pass out? Tsukui shook her head. The questions she's asking are purely about robotics. So with no way to mess up the conversation, father will eventually forget that he's talking to a member of the opposite sex and be able to talk comfortably. You seem to have thought that through, Todoroki said. Your level of thoughtfulness appears to be inconsistent as you didn't think twice about bringing us to him. Tsukui shrugged. Father explained that actually, you see, my brain can process things and run them through scenarios that will show me what effects my actions will have. It's basically a cheat code that lets me become the world's best strategist. However, this has some drawbacks. I have to think to activate it. It's not a natural thing, otherwise I would see the possibilities of everything at once and my head would explode. Literally. Whoa, Mina said. So you can be either super smart or super dumb? Kaminari said. There was a pause as Tsukui gave him a deadly glare, her eyes glowing red. Did you just call me dumb? She said. Well, Kaminari's dead. Mind a thought. No, Kaminari tried to figure out an explanation. Tsukui's eyes turned back to green and the glare was gone. PF50 ha 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 ha. Tsukui laughed. You should have seen the look on your faces. Wait, she was joking. Minta yelled. Tsukui walked up to Kaminari. Yeah, I'm not really mad per day. I'm insulted and I'm gonna beat you within an inch of your life first chance I get, but I'm not mad. Tsukui said. Is she mad or not? Kaminari frantically wondered. Anyway, you said you wanted to hang out, right? Mina asked. Oh yeah, that, Tsukui said. Actually, I wanted to see if you girls wanted to hang out. I haven't really been around girls other than my grandmother. That sounds great, Mina said. I've been wanting to get to know my new classmates better. Ditto, Toru said. I have nothing better to do. Gyro shrugged. I also have no plans and would like to participate, Momo said. Me too, Ochako said. Just not someplace too expensive, please. I've got nothing better to do. Ribbit. Suyu said. Great. Sukui said. I already know where to go. But we better leave before the teachers kick us out. Follow me. With that, the girls left. Suo, Kaminari said. Any of you guys want to hang out? No, said Todoroki, Takoyami, and Shoji. The first two just walked away, but Shoji stayed behind to explain. I have things I need to do, he said before leaving with the others. Well, I think bonding would be a great idea. Ida said. Well then let's do this. Kaminari said. Well, do it quickly and get off campus. If you're not seeing Midoriya, then get out. Eraserhead said, surprising everyone. AHHH, they shouted. Many hours later, Nezu walked into Izuku's lab. Progress, he asked. Things are progressing steadily. Izuku said, the data I got from All Might is just starting to make sense. I've been able to start designing. Suddenly something caught Nezu's attention. A snore. He looked to the side to see Mei, sleeping there soundly on the floor. Nezu looked back to Izuku for an explanation. Oa, Sukui came by and brought her along, Izuku said. She wanted to talk about machines and she and I talked for so long that she eventually just passed out. Nezu responded. I was under the impression you were terrified of women. Why did you not call the guards to escort her out? Well, she was so interested in my work and I got so into the conversation. Izuku stammered. Well now, how interesting. Beihatsum was her name, correct? Nezu said. Oh yes, Izuku said. Interesting. Well, we should call her parents first. We can continue talking about the project another time. Izuku nodded and called one of his robots to carry Mei, and the three left the building. So how do you eat? Ochako asked. The girls had decided to hang out at a restaurant and they were all shocked when she ordered food. Well, I didn't understand a lot of father's explanation, but from what I understand, when food or anything really goes into my mouth, it gets destroyed by my power source and then blown back out as a burp, Sukui answered. Oh, said Ochako. But how do you even taste it? Father said something about sensors allowing me to experience sensations like taste, smell, and touch, Sukui said. I honestly don't know how most of my systems work, at least not in detail. You would have to ask my father about that. Why is that? Momo asked. If you are an AI, shouldn't you be able to process information like a computer? If that's the case, then there should be no reason for you not to know that. Sukui shrugged. Father said that there is a limit to how smart he can make me. Which makes sense, I guess. You guys have a whole brain that makes you function. I have a small chip. Yeah, when you put it like that it makes sense, Mina said. So why do you call him father? Toru asked. Because he's my father, Sukui answered. Yeah, but doesn't that seem a little formal? Gyro said. You don't seem like the rich fancy type. No offense, Momo. None taken. Momo said. Sukui paused. She had never really thought about that. Papa Dad. Yeah, that last one. I like that one, Sukui said out loud. Hello, Gyro said. Sukui snapped her head back to the girls. Oh sorry, I was just thinking. Out loud. Ochako asked. Did I do that again? Sukui said. Sorry about that. I think it's a glitch. Wait, you can have glitches, Momo said. Wouldn't that be potentially dangerous? No, Dad said I shouldn't be able to get any major glitches. Just minor ones, Sukui reassured. Well, I guess if the professional said so, Mina said with a slight giggle. It feels weird to call someone my age a professional. Yeah, no offense, but your father is weird, Toru said. Not in a bad way, but in a weird way. Yeah, Sukui sighed. That's why I left him with Hatsune. He needs to interact with people more. Yeah, but Hatsune isn't exactly normal herself, Gyro said. That's what makes her right for the job. Sukui said. As much as I love talking about me, I would like to talk a little about you guys. Sure, let's start with me, Mina said. Okay, Sukui said. So from what I've seen, you can make acid, right? Yup, pretty neat, huh? Mina said proudly. Yeah, but why is your skin and hair pink and why do you have horns? Sukui asked. Mina shrugged. I dunno. You know, from what I've seen about quirks, sometimes people will gain random traits that have nothing to do with their quirks. I wonder why that is, Sukui said. Yeah, like that Takoyami guy and his bird head, Toru said. There probably is a reason for it, Momo said. Perhaps the thing that makes your skin immune to your acid has also turned it pink. Well, I'm not immune to acid, only resistant, Mina corrected. So I'm guessing you can only use your acid so much then, Sukui said. Ding ding ding. Correct, Mina said. Yeah, it kinda stinks, but that's quirks for you. Yeah, I don't even really have a quirk, but if I use my heat vision too much then I can't use it for a while, my head cools down, Sukui said. So even though you don't technically have a quirk, your heat vision still acts a lot like a quirk, Momo said. Yeah, but you're also super strong and fast, right? Toru asked. Yeah, which is weird to me. I mean, being strong makes sense, but how did Dad make me so fast when I probably weigh a ton? Sukui said. Wait a minute, we made the conversation about me again. To be fair, you're an android, it's hard not to be interested in you, Gyro said. Fair, but I still want to talk about the rest of you, Sukui said. My scanners can only tell me so much. You have scanners. What do they do? Toru asked. JHHH. Sukui screamed in frustration. The next day in the UA meeting room, thanks to Midoriya, Cementos, and Power Loader, we have finished installing 25% of the new security system, Nezu announced to all of the staff. It was lunchtime, and so Nezu had called in the staff for a meeting, much to their dismay. 25%, Power Loader said. All that, and we're only a quarter of the way through. Power Loader took care of a lot of physical work that couldn't be done by robots, and as such he was exhausted. Well, yes, and much of the work only gets harder and takes longer to do from here, Izuku said. But I have good news. The construction bots are done, so you no longer need to assist me. Thank God, Power Loader said. I'll still need your help on a few things, Cementos. Your quirk is just too useful. Sorry, Izuku said. It's fine, Cementos said. Now I would also like to encourage you to use Izuku's talents to further your lessons, Nezu said. Are you sure the kid is gonna have time for that? Eraserhead asked. Yeah, sounds like he has a lot on his plate, Present Mike said. It's fine, Izuku said. The construction bots are taking care of all of the physical work, so all I have to do is work out the blueprint, double-check the design, and supervise the construction. I'll have time to take care of any of your requests. That's good and all, but make sure to take some time for yourself, Eraserhead said. You seem like the type to overwork yourself. Well, if that's all, then you can all leave, Nezu said, except for Yagi and Midoriya. You two stay. Everyone else left the room, leaving the three alone. After waiting for a few seconds, Nezu spoke. How is Project Yusha coming along? Nezu asked. The first part of the project is about halfway done, Izuku said. It should be done before the sports festival. Good, Nezu said. However, I think I know a way you can work faster. Faster, Izuku said. Yes, you see, you can accomplish so much on your own. So I was thinking about giving you an assistant, Nezu suggested. Assistant, Izuku said nervously. Yes, I was thinking about having a competition among the support course students. Whoever wins gets to become your permanent assistant, Nezu said. Well, what do you mean by permanent? Izuku asked, noticing his choice of word. Well, I was thinking about things and I figured that the support course could also go through temporary internships, Nezu said. And you want me to be one of the people they intern with? Izuku asked, hoping he was wrong. That's correct, Nezu said. Let's face it, you're the best in your field, so it would make sense for people to want to learn from you. Well, Izuku said, twiddling his thumbs. It's true, All Might said. I've actually talked to Dave about you and he was very interested in your work. Dave? Izuku questioned. Who's? Wait a minute, Izuku thought. The only Dave that All Might ever worked with was David Shield. Izuku shouted. Yes, him, All Might confirmed. He said that we should visit Island sometime. Izuku almost fainted. Well, on to the next topic, Nezu said. How is the project the government gave us? That's actually progressing quite quickly, Izuku said. Turns out after doing it once it becomes much easier the subsequent times. I'll be ready for mass production soon. Now all I need is a little more time and bodies. Good, I will inform the government. I'm sure they will be very pleased, Nezu said. I still don't like this, All Might said. It feels wrong. The people Izuku creates aren't the same as the ones who died. Just copies, perfect copies, Nezu said. And we informed them of this and they insisted anyway. Besides, if you had a chance to make a copy of her, talking with all her thoughts and feelings, would you? All Might didn't respond. I'm sorry, but who is her? Izuku asked. An old friend, All Might said. Someone who died a long time ago. Oh, Izuku said. I'm sorry. It's fine, young Midoriya, All Might said. Well, if we're done here, then I suggest that we get back to work, Nezu said. You have to teach soon after All Might. Right, All Might sighed. He was not looking forward to it. I'll get back to work then, Izuku said. Just don't forget about your contractual breaks and day off, Nezu said. Izuku sighed. When he had signed the contract, he failed to notice that Nezu has put in clauses that required him to take at least an hour off of work each day and 1 day off per week, to make sure he didn't overwork himself. Yes, sir, Izuku groaned. Later with Class 1A, most of the class had gathered in the surveillance room already in their hero costumes, waiting for the rest of their classmates. What the fuck is taking them so long? Bakugo yelled. Do you ever stop cursing? Everyone turned to see that Ochako and Tsukui had arrived. I really like your costume, Tsukui, Ochako said. Thanks, Dad designed it when he was little, Tsukui explained. He wanted it to be his hero costume, but will you know? Ochako cringed slightly. Yeah, it must have been hard on him. Ochako had decided that she would become both the Midoriya's best friends, to make up for thinking they were weirdos when they first met, even though Tsukui had already told her that it was fine. Dad put all his hopes of being a hero into me, Tsukui said. I'm gonna be the best hero that ever lived. For both of us. TCH. Yeah, right, Bakugo said. Over my dead body. Nothing Deku makes will ever beat me. And it makes sense that Deku designed that. It looks fucking stupid. Well, I think it looks cute, Mina said walking in. Thank you, Mina, Sukui said. Well, I did make a few changes. The original design was, well, it's what you would expect from a 4-year-old with a green crayon. And Grandma did a great job sewing. Well, as far as I'm concerned, your dad has a knack for making cute things, Mina teased. Yup, Sukui said with a smirk. Do you like the smirk? I just perfected it this morning. You look even smugger than Bakugo, Kaminari said. What was that dunce face? Bakugo shouted. Have you seen Bakugo's smug face? Gyro snorted. I don't think Midoriya could design a more smug face if he tried. Fuck you earlobes, Bakugo snarled. It's true, Bakugo's smugness is incalculable. Being even smugger than him is scientifically impossible, Sukui said. Bakugo was fuming as everyone else laughed. Come on guys, aren't you being a little bit cruel? Kirishima said. I don't need your fucking help, shitty hair, Bakugo shouted. All right, is everyone here? All Might said, gathering everyone's attention. It seems like everyone is accounted for, Momo said. All Might looked at her and cringed slightly. He knew that a revealing costume was kinda mandatory due to her quirk, but it did not bode well for what was coming next. Good, All Might said. Well, I would like to welcome our guest, Izuku Midoriya. Izuku walked in nervously. Hello, I'm here to test out the new camera system, and Izuku spotted Momo. His face went pale. Izuku turned around at speeds Ida would be impressed by. Why ha ha. Mina burst into laughter. I'm sorry, I know I shouldn't be laughing, but PFT haha. Momo turned red. She really hated her costume. Well, my quirk requires that my skin be exposed, so this is unfortunately necessary. Oh right. Why your quirk? That makes sense. Izuku stuttered, still looking at the wall. Wait. You're probably really uncomfortable about your costume too. And I probably made you feel worse about it. Oh god, I'm sorry. It's fine, Momo said. I'm just glad you're not staring. Unlike some other people, everyone but Izuku looked at Minta. What? Minta said. I'm a pervert. What did you expect me to do? Wow, no shame whatsoever. All Might though. Mina had a mischievous smirk on her face. Geez, if he reacted that way to Momo, then what do you think he'll do when he finds out Toru is? Sukui covered Mina's mouth. Are you trying to kill him? Izuku turned around. Wait, I didn't see Toru when I walked in. I thought she was absent. Nope, right here, said the pair of shoes and floating gloves. Oh, I thought that Uraraka had just made a pair of gloves float with her quirk for some reason, Izuku said. That's so cool. What kind of material did you use to make your clothes invisible? And why didn't you use it for the gloves? Everyone in the room cringed. No one tell him, Gyro whispered, just loud enough to be heard by her class but not Izuku. Everyone nodded, Sukui making Mina nod. We'll talk about that later, All Might said. For now, let's move on to the assignment. Oh right, Izuku said. I am just here to test the new camera system and analyze your quirks. I'm not a teacher, but I am responsible for making obstacles for you to overcome. As if you could make anything I couldn't beat, Bakugo grumbled. Now let me explain today's task, All Might said. One explanation later. Right, Sukui said, giving Ochako a high five. After the teams were announced, the students moved into their teams. The matches were also selected randomly earlier today. All Might said, pulling out a paper with the matches on them. Sir, is it wise to leave all of this to chance? Ida asked. Life can be very random, Izuku said. Unexpected things can happen quickly, and you won't always get what you want. Everyone cringed once more. All Might more than anyone. I see, Ida said. Good point, Midoriya. All Might spoke. Well, with that out of the way, the first match is Sukui and Uraraka as heroes versus Bakugo and Ida as villains. Bakugo looked at Sukui and smirked. You're going down tin can. Sukui smirked right back at him. That's funny. You know I have all your moves downloaded into my head, right? So what? I'll just come up with something Deku hasn't seen. Bakugo yelled. Well, you better make your attacks count, Sukui said. Because guess what? My lasers are heat-based. What the hell does that realization hit Bakugo? Heat plus nitroglycerin equal boom. Bakugo looked at Izuku, who gave him an apologetic look. Fuck you, Deku, Bakugo said. Bakugo was not in a good mood. He sat in the bomb room, impatiently waiting for the match to start. We need to come up with a plan, Ida said. We don't need a fucking plan, Bakugo snarled. I beat them. We win. I don't believe you can beat Midoriya, Ida said. She has every advantage over you, as well as tools we don't know about. Do you? Shut it, Bakugo snarled. Nothing Deku makes can ever beat me. I don't know what grudge you have against Midoriya. Her father, that is, but your anger is blinding you to the facts, Ida said. I said shut it, Bakugo growled. Meanwhile, Sukui and Ochako stood outside of the building. Ochako looking slightly nervous while Sukui had a massive smirk on her face. So do you want to come up with a plan? Ochako asked. No need, Sukui said. We've already won. I know you're strong and all, but so are they, Ochako said. If they work together, we could be in serious trouble. Sukui just smirked at her. Them, work together. Yeah, no, they are already arguing. Wait, how do you know that? Ochako asked. Earlier I taped into the camera system. I've been watching both of them since they got in there, Sukui said. Is that allowed? Ochako asked. It's not. Not allowed, Sukui said. I'm just using the skills given to me, I guess. Ochako said, still not fully sure about this. So what are they saying? Well, Ada is just saying, Bakugo, we need to work together or we won't stand a chance, Sukui said, mocking Ada's voice while mimicking his arm movements. And Bakugo is going. Nay, nothing stupid Deku can make will ever beat me. Look at my massive ego, Sukui said, trying to make Bakugo sound as stupid as possible. Ochako giggled a little bit. Why does he call you Dad Deku anyway? Sukui scowled. It's an insult. It means someone who can't do anything. Oh, Ochako said. I kinda liked it. I thought it meant someone who could do anything. Which kinda fits your dad. Oh, Sukui said, her smirk returning. What do you think of my dad? Well, Ochako said, he's a bit strange, but that's not really his fault. He's just a victim of something he can't control. I feel bad for him, but at the same time, I admire him for not giving up. When people say you're worthless, it becomes really easy to believe them. So it's really impressive that he still managed to accomplish so much despite that. Sukui snickered. Hear that, Dad? She thinks you're impressive. Wait, he can hear us. Ochako shouted. Every word. All Might said. Young Midoriya, your father is currently unable to answer as he is close to passing out. You tricked me, Ochako said with a pout. Yup, Sukui said, sticking out her tongue. You're cute when you're mad. Ochako blushed intensely. You're just as bad as Mina. I'll take that as a compliment, Sukui said. Let the match begin. All Might said. Hero team, you may enter. Alright, so do we just walk in there? Ochako asked. Nope, I have a plan, Sukui said, her smirk turning into a grin. This is gonna be so much fun. Back with Bakugo and Ada. I'm going, Bakugo said. To find Midoriya, I suppose. Ada sighed. What else would I be doing, glasses? Bakugo snarled. Could you at least attempt to surprise attack her? Ada said. Well, that's not very heroic now, is it? Sukui's voice said from the earpieces Bakugo and Ada had. What? Ada said. Midoriya, how did you? I plugged myself into the system before we got here, Sukui explained. I have access to the communicators, cameras, and basically everything else. That means you're watching us, Ada said. I've been watching you, Sukui said. I do feel sorry for you, Ada. Not having a partner must suck. See this tin can? Bakugo said, holding up his middle finger. Anyway, as much as I would love to watch Bakugo act like a jackass all day, I have better things to do, so let's just this over with, Sukui said. Kaken, I'm 2 floors below you on the opposite side of the building. When you're ready to get your ass kicked, come and see me. Bruh, Bakugo roared in rage. That bitch. Bakugo ran out of the room before Ada could try and stop him. No, Bakugo, it's a trap, Ada said. Come on, Ada. Do you really think I would go through all the effort to trap him? Sukui said. That's like using a bazooka to kill a fly. RAHHH. Bakugo roared. I'm gonna fucking dismantle you. You hear me, you oversized microwave. You fucking. Also, just so know, I'm filtering what the communicators are letting me hear. And I'm only listening to Ada, Sukui said. So while I'm sure Bakugo is spitting out insults by the dozen, I can't hear any of them. Kahaha. JHHH. Bakugo was now using his explosions to make himself go faster towards the 2nd floor. Come on, Bakugo. Why are you making a lady wait? Sukui said. Come on, are you actually going to fight me? Well, not really fight, more like flailing angrily. Boom. Bakugo had enough and decided instead of using the stairs to just blow a hole to get to the floor beneath him. So how do you plan on beating me? Sukui asked. Do you just plan on unleashing your emotions at me, hoping that I give up out of pity? Because I don't deal in emotions. I deal in facts. And here's a fact for you. By the end of this, you are going to be crying. He ran into the room Sukui said she was in. Where the fuck are you? He shouted. Like a little bitch. Sukui finished. Kaboom. Back in the surveillance room. Half the cameras went out as a little less than half the building blew up. What the hell? Mina said. Is Bakugo dead? Kirishima asked. No, Kaken has resistance to his own explosions, and most of the force was directed outward, away from his body. Izuku explained. That being said, the recoil from an explosion that large is more than enough to put him out of commission. If I had to guess, Sukui likely lured Bakugo to that side of the building so she wouldn't get caught in a blast. Momo guessed. Oh, that's smart, Mina said. That's why she was taunting him so much. He was so mad he didn't think twice about running into a trap. But the cameras are down. How are we gonna see what happened on that side of the building? Kirishima asked. No worries, Izuku said, pressing a button on the terminal, activating Hawk Cam. Suddenly one of the screens that turned to static turned on again with the image moving toward the crater that was once half the building. Whoa, how did you do that? Toru asked. Oh, I made a bunch of bird robots that can be used as mobile cameras, Izuku explained. Now we should be able to see everything, and oh my god. Sensor mode. Back with Bakugo. Bakugo laid on the ground, bruised, beaten, and naked. He was also heavily dehydrated. All of his body fluids had been detonated, meaning he couldn't even use his quirk. And even if he could, his broken bones make fighting a futile effort. Of course, that didn't really mean much to Bakugo, so he slowly tried to get up anyway, using the rubble to help himself stand. "You're still awake." Bakugo looked up to see Tsukui standing in the non-destroyed part of the building above him. She jumped down into the crater and walked towards the struggling Bakugo. "That's impressive, I'll admit," Tsukui said. "And you somehow managed to stand." "Also impressive." Bakugo walked slowly towards her, pain rushing through him. His body screaming at him to just pass out already, but his mind refused. "You know, I can't feel pain, but according to my sensors you're in a lot of it," Tsukui said. "Like, oh boy, you really shouldn't be walking right now." "Shut up," Bakugo snarled, trying to sound menacing but his exhaustion making him sound pathetic. "You fucking liar. It's a fight," Tsukui said. "What, did you accept a one-on-one duel? How stupid are you? Oh yeah, come over here to this specific part of the building. It's definitely not a trap." Bakugo stood in front of her, summoning the nastiest glare he could. "So what's your plan here?" Tsukui asked. "Are you gonna try and stare me to death? Or..." Before Tsukui could finish, Bakugo summoned his strength and punched her right in the face. "Ahhh," Bakugo said as he pulled back his now bleeding hand. Tsukui was dumbfounded. She just stood there in a stupor as Bakugo repeated punched her. "I will eat you," he shouted in a broken voice. "Wow. Just wow," Tsukui said. Bakugo went in for another blow, but Tsukui grabbed his arm, stopping him from doing anything. Bakugo tried to punch her with his other arm, but she grabbed that as well. Bakugo struggled to try and escape her grip, but to no avail, tears brimming down his face as the futility of his actions started to sink in. "Oh my god, you actually are crying. I actually feel kind of bad now," Tsukui said. Tsukui let go, causing Bakugo to stumble back, and before he could do anything, Tsukui was in front of him, her fingers on his forehead. With a flick, Bakugo was knocked onto the ground. And before he could even try to get up, Tsukui sat down on top of him. "Hey, you wanna hear something cool?" Tsukui asked. Suddenly Tsukui's voice changed, sounding exactly like All Might's. "It's my voice modifier," she said. "Ochako is getting to the bomb now, so all I need to do is wait, and then when she gets there I'll tell Ida that he's out. Knowing our rule-abiding Ida, he'll fall for it hook, line, and sinker. Hey, let's see if I can make him do a little dance too." Bakugo said nothing, still struggling not to keep his eyes open. "You want to know something? Katsuki Bakugo," Tsukui said. "I feel bad that Ada was stuck with you, because honestly, I think that just about any team could have beaten you too. Not because of him, because of you. Because you are a self-righteous, entitled douchebag. You were praised for your quirk, something you got with pure luck, and was told the world is yours. Well, it's not. Point is, your partner would have lost because he got stuck with you. You're worse than useless. You're dead weight." "Tsukui, I'm outside the room," Ochako wisped through her communicator. "Got it. Wait for me to say go," she said. "Got it," Ochako said. "With Ida." "Ida," came All Might's voice on his communicator. "Your team is disqualified." "What?" Ida said. "Yes, sir, may I ask why?" "Why? You failed from keeping your partner from heavily damaging the building and potentially causing serious damage to the other students." All Might's voice said. "You are to return to the surveillance room immediately." "Why, yes, sir," Ida said in a depressed tone. "But first, you must perform the UA Dance of Failure," said All Might's voice. "What?" Ada said. "It is a UA tradition. It teaches humbleness. You wouldn't go against a tradition, would you?" All Might's voice said. "Of course not, sir. I will give it my all." Ada said. "How do I do it?" "Just dance, my boy," All Might's voice said. "Of course, by having the students attempt the dance on their own, it encourages them to try their best regardless of the situation." Ada said. "Yes," All Might's voice said. "Right then, I shall try my best." Ada said. What happened next was too ridiculous to fully describe, as Ida in his full armor attempted to pull off dance moves he had only ever seen on TV. Back in the surveillance room, it was a laugh riot in there. Everyone but Momo, Izuku, Shoji, Shoto, Takoyami, and Koda were laughing their asses off. "Tsukui, haha, you fucking genius," Mina said. "Oh, poor Ida," Momo cringed. "I can't believe he fell for that," Kaminari said. "This is ridiculous," Todoroki said. All Might tried his hardest not to laugh and was failing miserably. "Ida, my boy, I am so sorry." Back with Ida and Ochako. "All right, you can go in," Tsukui said over the communicator. "Enjoy the show." "What?" Ochako said. She got no response, so she just sighed and walked into the room. And then she froze. Uraraka, congratulations on your victory," Ada said while he attempted to dance. Ochako just looked at him with a dumbfounded expression for a few seconds before bursting into laughter. "Laugh while you can," Ada said. "Next time you'll be doing the dance of shame." This made Ochako laugh harder. Slowly, Ochako walked past Ada while trying not to choke on her own laughter. The battle is over. Why are you still going toward the bomb? Ada asked. No reason, Ochako said. Ochako touched the bomb and a few seconds afterward All Might announced the result. Hero team wins, he said. Wait, what? Ada said, stopping his attempt at dancing. Sorry, Ada, Ochako said. Sorry for making you dance. Tsukui apologized over the communicator. How did you like my voice modifier? Ada fell to his knees and screamed at the sky. I've been duped. Later, back at the surveillance room, after confirming that Bakugo had made it to the medical wing safely, they continued class. Can anyone tell me who was the most important player in this battle? All Might asked. Momo raised her hand. Hyungye Yarazu. All Might called. As much as I hesitate to say it. Midoriya, Momo said. Ouch, Tsukui said. While Midoriya did several things that were completely unnecessary, she was also the only person who actually managed to do anything, Momo said. Bakugo was dead set on fighting Midoriya, and his only chance of actually winning an encounter with her was a surprise attack. Once Midoriya took control of the cameras, there was no chance of that ever happened, essentially taking him out of the fight before it even began. Same goes for Ida. Due to his rule-abiding nature, all Tsukui needed was a reasonable excuse to get Ida out of the fight. In other words, they stood no chance. Shoto said. Still, Midoriya could have won without causing that much property damage. She also didn't need to confront Bakugo after he had already been taken out of the fight, Momo said. But her method was still foolproof. To think that following the rules would have led me astray, Ada said. Sorry about that, Ida. Tsukui chuckled. It's fine, Ada said. I will simply need to improve my awareness and your dance skills, Mina said. Well, if that's all, then we can move on to the next match, All Might said. All Might, Izuku said. Can I have a word with Tsukui? Tsukui looked at Izuku, and judging by his expression, he was not happy. Oh, so this is what dread feels like, Tsukui thought. Outside, Izuku brought Tsukui outside the surveillance room. Suo, what's wrong? Tsukui asked. Cause you look upset. Izuku sighed. I'm not upset. I'm just disappointed. Tsukui's eyes widened. What? Why? I know I caused a little too much collateral damage, but that's not what I'm disappointed about. Izuku cut her off. I'm disappointed because of what you did to Kaken. But why? Tsukui asked frantically. There must be something wrong with her processors because she was not supposed to able to stutter. I took him down. That's what I was supposed to do. You weren't supposed to humiliate him, Izuku shouted. First of all, the taunting was cruel and mostly unnecessary. I will admit some taunting might have been required to get him to fall into a trap like that, but that was excessive. And then you could ambushed him and used your strength to knock him out instantly. Instead, you choose to detonate his whole body, not only causing a lot of damage to the building and Kaken. At this point, Tsukui felt so small. Never had Izuku scolded her before. And that's not even the worst part. Izuku shouted. All that other stuff was excessive. But what you said and did to him in the crater was downright cruel. But Tsukui tried to say something, but Izuku was not having it. He was beaten and naked, and for no good reason you went down there and humiliated him even more, Izuku said. And you called him entitled. Tsukui, you were born with numerous abilities and knowledge on how to use them. You of all people should not be calling anyone entitled. But he hurt you, Tsukui shouted. I know you tried to hide it from me, but I figured it out. He hurt you and he's been hurting you for years. He's an asshole, a bully. He got what he deserved. Izuku sighed and shook his head. Yes, he hurt me, but humiliating him, stooping to his level, won't fix that. As your creator now, as your father, I expected better from you. Tsukui looked down at the floor, ashamed. I know that I used some of his brain waves to make you, but I only used them as a baseline. Izuku said, I don't want you ever doing something like that again. Yes, Dad, Tsukui said. There was a short pause before Izuku spoke again. I'm not going to ask you to apologize, because that would just make him angrier. But I want you to know this. The reason I used some of his brain waves is because I admire his will. Even after he was heavily injured, he refused to give up. He didn't let himself pass out until he was halfway to the medical wing. Kaken has the drive to become a hero I've never seen in anyone else. That's the part of him I wanted to give to you. Izuku walked back into the room. Tsukui stood there until suddenly she legs failed her. An unpleasant sensation filled her, one that was completely new to Tsukui. And then a realization hit her. Oh, I guess I can feel pain. Hey, are you okay? Ochako asked. School had ended a while ago and the two had decided to hang out at a ramen shop. However, the whole time Tsukui seemed down. I fucked up. Tsukui sighed. Was it about what you did to Bakugo during class? Ochako asked, having a strong feeling that was the case. Cause you kinda went a little too far. Well, actually you went way too far. I know, Tsukui groaned. Dad said he was disappointed in me. Ochako cringed. There were very few times she ever disappointed her parents, but when she did she felt like the worst person in the world. Yeah, that sucks. Tsukui sighed. I still hate him, but looking back I should have stopped after blowing him up. I think you should have stopped before that, but whatever. Ochako thought. Why do you hate him so much? Ochako asked. I mean, I know he's kind of a jerk, but I don't think it's because of that. It's because he's an asshole. Sukui shouted. He's been picking on my dad for years. He's the reason Dad made me. Because that fucker has been making sure people won't go anywhere near him. Wait, he's been bullying him? Ochako asked. Since he was fucking 5. Sukui shouted. But Dad doesn't care. He still defends him and says he can be a great hero, despite the fact that he's been beating him up with his quirk for years. There was a short pause before Ochako spoke. Why didn't you tell the teachers? Dad doesn't want me to, Sukui said. He said it would hurt his career as a hero. So instead you thought that he would rather you humiliate him in front of the entire class. Ochako pointed out. I know it was dumb, Sukui admitted, but he just pissed me off, and I was tired of him just getting away scot-free. I had to do something. She felt a hand on her back and looked at Ochako. It's okay, Ochako said. Honestly, if I was in your position, I would probably just have told the teachers. You ignored him when he asked you not to tell anyone about you being a robot. Android, Sukui corrected. And the reason I didn't is because of how Dad works. He always cares more about others way more than himself. If I do something that just affects us, then he won't be that mad, especially because it's something that probably would end well for us. But with Bakugo, it negatively affects someone else, meaning that Dad would probably hate me if I went through with it. Trust me, I wanted to. But I ran the idea through my processors and decided it was a bad idea. Why didn't you run humiliating Bakugo through your processors? Ochako asked. I did, Sukui sighed. Once, at first I just wanted to blow him up. I ran that through my processors and figured that Dad would only be a little upset. But then I kept thinking of new ways to humiliate him, and I didn't think to run those through my processors. I have a program in my head that tells me what my actions will do, and yet I somehow still suck at decision making. Sukui slammed her head onto the table. I am a fucking failure. No, you're not, Ochako said. You might be an android, but you're basically human. You walk like one, talk like one, and act like one. And humans make mistakes. We have all sorts of things to help us not make mistakes, but we still do. No one's perfect. Sukui sighed. Thanks, Ochako. You're welcome, Ochako said, giving her a bright smile. Now let's eat. Our food is getting cold. Don't worry about it. I'll heat him up, Sukui said, looking at Ochako's bowl while her eyes glowed red. Please don't laser my noodles, Ochako said. Sukui pouted and her eyes went back to green. Fine. Meanwhile, elsewhere, Nezu sat in his office doing what he always did, plotting and drinking tea, when suddenly he heard a knock at his door. Come in, Nezu said. Izuku slowly walked into his office before giving Nezu a nervous look. Ah, Izuku. Good, good, Nezu said. I wanted to talk about Suku as well. Calling it a fight would be horribly inaccurate. I wanted to talk about Sukui's humiliation of Bakugo and Ida. I am so sorry about that. Izuku rapidly apologized. I don't know what she was thinking when she did that. I swear I will make sure this never happens again. What did Bakugo do to you? Nezu asked, making Izuku freeze. What? Izuku said quietly. Sukui has existed for less than a year, meaning that unless Bakugo did something incredibly horrible to her within that time, then Sukui's hatred of him stems from you. Nezu explained. Bakugo is also known to act extremely aggressively towards you, and you tend to act even more meek and fearful whenever he is around. So my question to you is, what did Bakugo do to you that would make Sukui act in such a vicious and slightly amusing manner? Well, Izuku was sweating nervously as he desperately tried to find a way to answer this question. Was he perhaps one of the people who bullied you? Nezu asked. And no, Izuku lied. Kaken would never do something like that. There was a short pause before Nezu shook his head and spoke again. Izuku, you and I are both aware of my abilities, so I don't know why you would think it was a good idea to lie to me. Izuku stayed silent. How about this? You're going to tell me everything. And if you lie 3 times, then Bakugo will be expelled. Nezu said. What? Izuku shouted in shock. That's not fair. Yes, it would be incredibly unfair for you to get him expelled because you don't want to do something as simple as telling me the truth, Nezu said, his upbeat tone never changing. Now I'll ask you again. Did he bully you? Well, he may have said some mean things and accidentally used his quirk on me a few times. Izuku lied. That's another lie, Nezu pointed out. 2 more of those and Bakugo is out. Izuku panicked. Okay, maybe it wasn't accidental. But I'm sure he just wanted to practice his quirk and needed something to use it on. That's another lie, Nezu said. But I wasn't lying, Izuku said. Really, I'm sure that's why. I said that if you lie 3 times then Bakugo is expelled, Nezu repeated. I never said those lies have to be directed at me. Izuku stopped talking as what Nezu said sunk in. We both know that he doesn't need to use a person to practice his quirk on. And even if he did, that will still be both cruel and illegal, Nezu told him. You have one last chance, Izuku. Tell me the truth. Bakugo's future is in your hands. Izuku hung his head in defeat. He had no choice. He had to tell him everything. The next day, "Thank you for coming, Mrs. Bakugo," Nezu said, greeting his guest as they entered his office. "No problem. Now, what the fuck did my son do now?" Mitsuki asked. "I didn't do shit," Bakugo said. "I ain't Miss Suki," Izuku said, shocked at just how upfront she was. "Oh hey, Izuku. Oh, Tsukui's here too," Mitsuki said before turning her head to her son. "And I doubt we got called here for something either of them did, so it must have been you." "Actually, it might have been me," Tsukui said nervously. She knew where this was going and she would accept her punishment with dignity. "Not really," Nezu said. "Wait, what?" Tsukui said in slight shock. "Never mind, guess I don't know where this was going. We will talk about it when our last guest arrives," Nezu explained. "Last guest?" Izuku asked. "Who? Sorry, I'm late. The traffic was really bad, I hope you can forgive me." Izuku froze as he immediately recognized the voice of the person who just came into the room. He turned around and his fears were confirmed. Mom," he shouted in shock before turning to Nezu. "Why you called my mom? But I'm not a student." "True, but you are still a minor and therefore I am still obligated to tell her what you told me," Nezu explained. "So I invited her over and she said yes." "Izuku, what is this about?" Inko asked as she took a seat next to her son. "Allow me to explain," Nezu said. "Yesterday the students were having 2-on-2 matches against each other." "Yeah, and he fucking lost," Mitsuki said. "I'm guessing that was why he was crying yesterday." "Hag," Bakugo growled at his mother. Tsukui snickered, but Izuku gave her a look, making her cut it out immediately. "Yes, he did in fact lose," Nezu confirmed. "But there's more to it than that." Nezu coughed to clear his throat before speaking again. She hacked into the communications and used them to taunt Bakugo into a trap before using her heat vision to detonate all of the nitroglycerin on his body, blowing up half of the building they were in and doing horrible damage to Bakugo's body and destroying all of his clothes. Then she went up to him and taunted him some more while he attempted to punch her metal body, doing more damage to himself. She then proceeded to knock him down, sit on him and humiliate his partner, all the while blaming him for their loss. The fight was being monitored, so this all happened in front. Izuku and Tsukui cringed as both Mitsuki and Inko had shocked looks on their faces. Mitsuki recovered first before looking at Tsukui and saying, "That was a little bit much." "Yeah, I know," Tsukui sighed. "Normally this would call for a suspension at the very least. However, I decided to ask Izuku what Bakugo could have done to deserve such humiliation, and the response I got was very enlightening," Nezu said. Bakugo raised an eyebrow in confusion. He had a bad feeling about this. "What are you talking about?" "You see, after forcing the truth out of Izuku, I found out that Bakugo had been bullying Izuku for the last 10 years, Nezu said. "I fucking knew it," Mitsuki shouted. "I always knew you were being a fucking asshole to him this whole time. But whenever I asked Izuku, he would always make excuses for you. But not this fucking time." "Kei Katsuki," Inko said, giving him a betrayed look. "I just put the nerd in his goddamn place." "It's not fucking bully, old hag," Bakugo shouted back. "You're right. It's not bullying," Nezu said, getting everyone's attention. "It's more along the lines of serious physical and mental abuse." Mitsuki turned to Nezu, eyes wide with disbelief. "What? Apparently Bakugo has been physically beating Izuku using his quirk, which, may I remind you, is illegal, for long periods of time, quite frequently, all the while saying horrible things to him. In fact, his nickname, Deku, translates to useless, meaning he literally addresses him as useless each time he sees him. This almost surely the cause for Izuku's extremely low self-esteem," Nezu said. "This repeated targeting combined with Izuku's quirklessness is almost certainly the reason Izuku was ostracized by all of his fellow students, meaning that he is responsible for socially isolating him as well. This behavior continued into his teens to the point where he literally told him to jump off the school roof." The room was silent for a moment as Nezu let his words sink in. Everyone but Izuku was shocked. Inko had a look of horror etched on her face as tears slid down her cheeks. Tsukui, who had already known about the bullying but didn't know just how bad it was glaring at Bakugo, her eyes glowing red. Izuku just had his head down, ashamed that he may have ruined Katsuki's chances at becoming a hero. Bakugo was glaring at Nezu for saying all this unimportant shit that was sure to piss off his mother. And Mitsuki. No one could see her expression as she stood there frozen in place. Apparently the teachers and staff of those schools just lied in order to not harm Bakugo's chances of becoming a hero just because of a quirkless child, Nezu explained. "Please be reassured that we'll be investigating those schools for discrimination and child endangerment." There was another long pause before Mitsuki finally unfroze. Suddenly the room was filled with a dangerous aura emanating off of her. She turned around to face her child and Bakugo felt fear course through him. "How fucking dare you," she said with barely contained fury. "You want to be a fucking hero, and you do shit like that." Izuku butt in. "Aunt Mitsuki, Mitsuki turned to him and Izuku instantly closed his mouth in fear. "I don't want to hear any more of your excuses, so sit down and shut the fuck up." Anything Izuku could have said was drowned out by mind-numbing terror. I'm not going to punish you here, Mitsuki said, turning back to Bakugo. But when we get home I don't even fucking know what I'm going to do to you. Why? Everyone looked back at Inko, who was now actively sobbing. Why? Why would you do such a thing? Inko asked. I thought you were friends. Why? I don't understand. Mitsuki quickly moved to comfort her crying friend, wrapping her arms around her all the while glaring at her son, telling him without words that this was his fault. Bakugo actually felt a bit of guilt, but he quickly, Mom, Izuku said quietly. You told me you fell, Inko said to her son. Or that it was an accident. Or, why did you lie to me, Izuku? Even more, shame filled Izuku as he couldn't even find the will to look his mother in the eye. Now, Mrs. Bakugo, your son has committed several illegal acts that in any other scenario would not only result in his immediate expulsion but would also likely land him in a juvenile detention center, Nezu said. Mitsuki was seething with rage, her eyes fixed on her son, who was now beginning to realize how fucked he was. However, Nezu said, after looking things over and after Izuku begged me for 5 hours non-stop, I have decided to leave the decision of Bakugo's expulsions in the hand of Mrs. Midoriya. In truth, Nezu didn't really have much choice. Expelling Bakugo would cause Izuku to have a mental crisis bigger than the one he is currently having. That would mean Izuku might not even be able to work, and if he did work it would likely be at dramatically slower speeds. This would displease the government, who had a lot to ask of the young man, and they would most likely force Nezu to take Bakugo back anyway. However, neither him nor the government could stop Inko from suing the Bakugos, which, given the fact that it would be a case involving two UA students, would inevitably catch the media's attention, and after that Nezu would have no choice but to expel Bakugo. And the government couldn't do anything about that without seriously harming UA's reputation. So, in the end, it was all in Inko's hands. Inko, Mitsuki said to her friend, I won't blame you, no matter what you do. You're my friend and I let my son do something terrible to yours. Whatever you want to do, I won't hate you for it. Bakugo balled his fist. This whole part of his day sheds a different light on his actions. Seeing Inko and Mitsuki's reactions actually managed to make the boy feel a little bad. But still, they were talking about his future as a hero. If Inko wanted to, she could put an end to all his hopes and dreams in one fell swoop. Inko sniffed. It's not your fault, Mitsuki. Those teachers who let him get away with it and encouraged him are the ones responsible. I won't press charges. Inko looked at Bakugo. I don't know why you would owe something like that to Izuku, but I really hope that you can improve and become a better hero. Well, that felt like getting blown up all over again. Fuck, why does hurt? Bakugo wondered as he avoided eye contact with anyone in the room. And why the fuck does this feel familiar? Are you fucking kidding me? Tsukui shouted. You mean he just gets away with this? She wanted to punch something, Bakugo in particular, but her programming wouldn't allow her, so all she could do is scream. Oh heavens no, Nezu said. While we will be keeping Bakugo enrolled here, there will be consequences for his actions. Firstly, Bakugo will have to attend several therapy and anger management sessions. He will be excluded from all extracurricular events, including the sports festival, and if he is caught breaking the rules, he can be subject to immediate expulsion. Bakugo's eyes widened. If he couldn't participate in the sports festival, then how the hell was he supposed to get exposure? Bakugo was about to speak up when his mother saw him open his mouth and glared at him, telling him without words to shut his mouth. That didn't do much to calm Tsukui, who was still enraged. Collecting herself, Tsukui spoke. Can I leave for a little bit? Yes, in fact, I would like to speak to Mrs. Midoriya and Mrs. Bakugo alone, please, Nezu said. Bakugo didn't say a word as he got up and left the room, slamming the door behind him. Tsukui grabbed her father by the wrist and dragged him out of the room. There was a short pause before Nezu spoke again. Now, let's talk about Izuku. As I said earlier, I had to force information out of him while he tried to defend Bakugo. Why the hell would he do that? Mitsuki asked. He has to know that what Katsuki was doing to him was wrong. He did, Nezu said, at least on some level. The fact that he hid his abuse for Bakugo's sake shows that deep down he knows that what Bakugo did was wrong and therefore could get him in trouble. However, he most likely did not want to confront that fact. He made up excuses in his head, trying to justify or explain away Bakugo's abuse. This is likely because he still desperately wishes to be friends with Bakugo like they were when they were young, so he just endures the abuse and hopes that it ends. Oh, Izuku, Inko said sadly. The only exception to this seems to be when Bakugo targeted other children. Then he would attempt to stop him. Nezu explained. I think it goes without saying that Izuku will need to go to therapy. Oh well. As his employer, I can't force him to, but since you're his mother you can. Oh of course, Inko stuttered. My poor Izuku. Good, now one last thing, Nezu said. This desire to be friends with Bakugo again was likely a result of his loneliness. The fact that you had to work most of the time not helping this, although that was not your fault. Now that you have much more free time, I would like to suggest that you move on campus. This would allow you and Tsukui to spend much more time with him and would allow us to protect you. Protect me? Inko questioned. Yes, you see right now most people only know about a rumor saying that a robot girl is a UA student. They don't know who she is, what she looks like, or who made her, Nezu explained. But when they do, I have no doubt people will want to get their hands on him. Whether it be to kill him to try and stop the new technological advancements or to try and use him for their own purposes. And there is a large chance that they would try to use you to get to him. Inko's eyes went wide. She had never really considered such a thing, but when Nezu said it, it sounded so obvious. I'll do it, Inko said shakily. Even if I wasn't in danger, I want to help my son. Nezu's smile grew a little bigger. Well then, let's get the paperwork sorted out. Meanwhile, Tsukui dragged Izuku outside further and further away from Nezu's office. Tsukui, Izuku said. Tsukui stopped, letting go of his wrist and turning to meet his eyes. Why? Tsukui shouted. Why do you keep defending that asshole? And don't give me that crap about him not giving up. He gave up on you pretty fucking fast. Izuku tried to say something, but Tsukui cut him off. He has caused you nothing but pain, and yet you still want to be friends with him, Tsukui shouted. Tsukui cut him off again. I looked through my processors over and over again, but even they can't find a reason for why you would do this to yourself, Tsukui shouted. Because it was better than being alone, Izuku said. There was a short pause as what Izuku said sunk in. Because the explosions and insults always hurt less than whenever I was sitting there with no one to talk to, Izuku said, tears starting to roll down his cheeks. He was the closest thing to a friend I ever had. I really wanted to be friends with him again. I wanted to pretend like those things didn't happen. There was another short pause before Izuku spoke again. I'm sorry, Tsukui, Izuku said to his creation. I programmed you to care about me and then got upset when you did. Too, I'm not okay. I shouldn't act like I know better. I have failed you as a father. Izuku was going to say more when he felt two arms wrap around him. Dad, I'm sorry for yelling. Tsukui apologized. You haven't failed me. You just made mistakes. And from what I'm told, that's just part of being human. Tsukui, Izuku said. I could have handled the situation better too, Tsukui admitted. So now that we've apologized, can we just put this behind us? Izuku looked at her for a moment before smiling. That sounds good. Thank you, Tsukui. You're welcome, Dad. Tsukui smiled back.